Hi, welcome back, everyone. This is your friend Greedy Fanfics, bringing you another fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the second part of What If Deku Had a Body-Swapping Quirk. All credit for this story goes to Maul, so please support them by checking out the link in the description for more details. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more content like this. Now, let's get into the fanfic. Aizawa is throwing himself at Katsuki's door hard enough to rattle it on its hinges. Katsuki rolls over onto his chest, propping his chin up on his pillow to glare at the door, and he tries his damnedest to work up the energy to curse the man out for waking him up so early because the light that leaks into his room under his curtains indicates that the sun is still bluish, and it's way too fucking early in the morning for whatever bullshit Aizawa is pulling. He feels stale. Like he's dusty and full of cobwebs. Like a room that hasn't been aired out in decades, and when he swallows, his throat grates against itself, raw and dry. He runs a hand over himself to take stock, his fingers catching in the buttons of his stiff, wrinkled uniform shirt instead of skirting over the soft cotton of the t-shirt he usually wears to bed, an old skull shirt that has a hole in the armpit, and never sees the light of day outside of his dorm room. The door rattles again, bends under the man's weight as he throws himself against the surface, but it doesn't break. The dorms were meant for extra security for the students, Class 1A specifically, it seemed, and UA sure as hell didn't cut any corners. Katsuki would know. His door has survived no less than 3 nightmare-fueled, explosion-filled freakouts on his part. Not so much as a mark on them. He remembers glowering at his breakfast as he listened to Deku nerd out about the dorms the first morning they spent here in the dorms, the nerd's hair ruffled from sleep and his face pink and his pajamas hanging off of him. Katsuki had never seen Deku in such a state before, not since they were little, and at the time, he'd been annoyed, but now he only misses hearing Deku's rambling. His cracking, pitchy voice that only ever devolved into mumbling that no one else could understand. The walls must be made of reinforced concrete, but somehow the rooms aren't cold like you'd expect them to be. A heating system, maybe, so they were concerned with our comfort here, too, not just safety, but still. UA was already considered the most secure place in the city, but now, the dorms might be the most secure place in all of Japan. Those doors have some sort of shock-absorbing material in them, so they might be hollow with springs inside, or it could be a quirk. I wouldn't be surprised if UA got some heroes like Rock Lock, not Rock Lock himself because his quirk doesn't work on large areas. But wouldn't it be so cool if it did, and… At that point, Katsuki had slammed his hands down on the table and screamed at Deku to shut the fuck up before stalking off to his room, wondering to himself if the nerd had performed fucking experiments on his room to know all of that about the walls and the doors. Creepy, shitty nerd. Now, he wishes he'd stayed. He's realizing, now that Deku isn't around and Katsuki is more and more often left in total silence, how few memories he has of Deku like that one. A lifetime together, and all Katsuki can remember is all the times he's cut the nerd off or told him to just be quiet, all the times the nerd smiled at him after a rough fight that left him bruised and bloodied. All the times Katsuki left him bruised and bloodied. When he gets Deku back, he'll be sure to listen. Unless the nerd starts getting annoying, then Katsuki will tell him to shut the fuck up again. There's only so much he can take, really, and he can't be blamed for that. If no one ever cuts Deku off, he'll keep going until he suffocates. And he doesn't plan to ever be apart from the nerd for this long again. He won't have to search through his memories for Deku if the dork is standing right next to him. God, the early morning and the lack of sleep is making him goddamn sappy. He growls and buries his face into his pillow, trying to ignore the rest of the world beyond his room and go back to sleep, his face and the tips of his ears hot against the cool fabric. In the hallway, Aizawa curses under his breath, not far enough under, apparently, because Katsuki can hear it through the door, however muffled it may be, and grunts as there's a pause in the barrage against his door. Bakugu! A voice hisses, and it sounds like Aizawa has his forehead pressed against Katsuki's dorm room door, desperate. Open the damn door, kid, come on! Katsuki holds his breath and stares at the door as the doorknob rattles. Still, Katsuki is feeling spiteful and heavy and doesn't dare move even as Aizawa once again grows tired of trying to turn the locked doorknob and resorts to knocking, severe and panicked, and then again throwing his weight into the solid surface of Katsuki's door in a futile attempt to break it down. Katsuki knows there is a reason Aizawa is so desperate to get in the room, but he doesn't have the energy to match his panic. Whatever it is out there, he is safer in here on this side of his door, where he doesn't yet have to face it. Ignorance really is bliss. Again, the door strains in its frame, and Aizawa lets out a frustrated yell. Katsuki knows he should get up and let the man in, but his dresser is pressed against the left side of the door, and moving it looks like it will take more energy than he has in him. He's getting there, but it's a slow process. He blinks slowly, and his face sinks into his pillow. His whole room is in disarray, worse than it's ever been even after his own freakouts and breakdowns and tantrums. There's the dresser, all of its knickknacks he kept on the top scattered across his floor in a heap of dried flowers and a picture frame and an all-might plushie, replaced with the weights he stores in his closet for late night, post-curfew and insomnia-ridden training sessions, making barricade against the door that, altogether, probably weighs as much as All Might, not Yagi but All Might. Before his injury, the drawers are thrown open randomly, clothes spilling out, and his desk chair is left overturned in front of his closet as if he jammed it up under the knob and then knocked it over again. Its legs jut out like a body in the middle of rigor mortis, all stiff, uncomfortable angles. Despite all of this, his curtains are pulled almost meticulously over his window and the balcony door, tied together with a tight knot that he wouldn't know how to replicate even if he had instructions laid out in front of him. The shag rug in the middle of his room is matted flat with footsteps that he's pretty sure aren't his. The foot-shaped indentations that are layered over each other 100 times over are too small, and it looks like whoever was in his fucking room did nothing but pace all night, and he's not a pacer. Katsuki has never been one to let his idle, burning energy fester under his skin, but he prefers to let it out with a whole lot more explosion and cursing and screaming than an activity like pacing allows for. His mind conjures up an image of Deku cowering on his balcony in nothing but a flimsy hospital gown and layers of bandages, all idle energy, and hurried glances over his thin shoulder. Katsuki sits up so fast he gives himself head rush, and something in his back crackles in uncomfortable protest. Deku. Fucking not Deku. Hikage. It wasn't safe. The body brought me here, so it must be safe here. You can stay here and watch for danger. I don't care. Sleep well, Katsuki. He scans the corners of his room, but they're empty. Not even a fucking cobweb or dust bunny. Aizawa rams himself into the door again, and Katsuki's dresser creaks ominously, the weights on top threatening to topple over and put a hole in his floor. He ignores it, instead bending over to check under his bed because that Hikage guy seemed like exactly the sort of creep who would crawl up under Katsuki's bed while he was fucking sleeping in it. He lifts the bed skirt, almost desperate, but Hikage is not under there and neither is Deku or Nana. Fuck! Katsuki spits, tugging at his hair until his scalp stings. Damn it, fucking shitty fucking nerd. These vestiges are more trouble than they're fucking worth, and Katsuki wishes he could be pissed at Deku for any of this, but he can't find it in himself. He's worried, and that's sure as hell pissing him off, but it's not Deku's fault. If only Katsuki could get his hands on that soul fucker bitch. She'd regret doing this to Deku, he'd make sure of it, and he'd enjoy every second. This is all her fault, and it's that robot bitch's fault, and it's UA's fault for making them clean up that stupid park instead of telling people to pick up their own damn trash. He blames everyone else. Everyone except for Deku. Katsuki stands in the middle of his room and spins in a slow circle like he might find the nerd this way, like he's somehow hiding in plain sight or right under Katsuki's nose. Panic bubbles up under Katsuki's sternum like boiling water, a balloon of feeling that he suffocates on. His closet door is closed, and he knocks the overturned chair away in his haste to throw the door open, and it clatters against the wall loud enough that Aizawa must hear it because he shouts for Katsuki again and attacks the door with renewed fervor. Katsuki opens the closet door, and light spills into the shadowed room. His shirts have been torn from their hangers, leaving them in heaps and piles on his floor, and in the corner of the closet, Deku is wedged as far into the farthest corner from the door as possible, his head hanging on his neck so his chin rests between his collarbones, and his knees are curled almost to his chest, the hospital gown hanging off of him like damp laundry hung out to dry. His scarred hands lay limp on the ground next to his feet, and his bangs flutter with his even exhales. He's fucking asleep in Katsuki's closet. Katsuki stands in the doorway, watching like some kind of creep, one hand gripping the frame hard enough that the sharp edges dig into his palm, and his shadow lays across Deku's sleeping form like a dark blanket. Deku makes a snuffling sound, but he doesn't move or wake, and Katsuki drops to his knees in front of the nerd. His knees protest the impact, but he ignores the pain in favor of crawling closer until he and Deku take up the whole of the closet floor together, surrounded with Katsuki's shirts and the nose-clogging, sweet smell of his own sweat mixed with the generic, plain detergent the school supplies for them. It's kind of gross. Deku's legs are covered in bandages, and what skin isn't covered is mottled with purple-black bruises that haven't yet begun to yellow around the edges. They're harsh against the nerd's tan, freckled skin. Katsuki hasn't seen him so close in all the time since Deku acquired the bruises, and part of him is glad for it, but the other part hates himself, burning with guilt. He should have saved Deku from all of this. Katsuki swallows hard and reaches for Deku's face. The pads of his fingers skim over the nerd's jaw, following the line of it as if to reassure himself that Deku is whole and alive, albeit asleep in his fucking closet. This is so fucking weird. Deku shifts then, as Katsuki caresses his face. He groans and lifts his head, eyes fluttering and blinking slowly. He drags in a breath and catches Katsuki's eye in the dark shadows of the closet. Katsuki hadn't bothered to turn on the light before he invaded the space, and he's glad for it only because if he had to face the nerd's weird-ass eye sparkle at this distance, it might have killed him. Because those are the nerd's eyes, this is the set of his jaw. No one else's. Katsuki holds his breath. Kaken? Deku murmurs, squinting up at him from where he's wedged into the dark corner of Katsuki's closet. And his voice, it sounds like him. Not Nana, not Hikage, not like any of the other loser vestiges. Like Deku. He releases his straining lungs with a whoosh. Deku? Katsuki breathes, not daring to let himself be hopeful. He drops his hands from the nerd's jaw and grabs him by his shoulders this time, gripping tightly. If it's painful, the nerd says nothing. The thin hospital gown folds and yields under Katsuki's hands. He leans into the touch, reaching up to rest his fingers over the crest of Katsuki's cheekbone. The touch is light and fluttering, and Katsuki burns at the 3 points of contact between them. Mid. He might be asking if he's dreaming or if he's dying, but Katsuki wouldn't know because he cuts himself off, his face going slack and void of any emotion like a sheet falling over his face. Deku's jaw falls an inch, leaving Katsuki to stare at his back molars and the dull crown on one of his teeth, and his brows furrow and unfurrow as his expression twitches. He makes a choked-off noise in the back of his throat, almost keening but some vague rendition of Katsuki's name, maybe. He tells himself he's imagining it. Deku doesn't know what he's saying. Deku's scarred, crooked fingers grip Katsuki's forearms with enough force to ache like hell. The bones in his arms creak and rub together, but he grips Deku back just as hard, desperate, like he can keep whatever's going to happen at bay for another second. Another minute, and everything would be fine. He holds on, and Deku gapes in his face, his eyes wide and body growing taut under Katsuki's fingers. He mutters something like a million denials under his breath, but his eyes are far away and not looking at Katsuki. The nerd draws in a deep breath that sucks all of the air out of the closet and out of Katsuki's own lungs, and he doesn't exhale for a long, dragging moment. He opens and closes his mouth like a fish and holds the breath and holds it still, as Katsuki's door explodes out of the frame, knocking over the dresser with a reverberating, teeth-rattling thump as the weights roll across the floor of his dorm room. One of them strikes the opposite wall with enough force to put a sizable dent in the smooth surface. But Katsuki couldn't care less, not when he can feel Deku unraveling beneath his explosive fingers. Katsuki searches Deku's face for any remaining trace of the nerd. He can almost see him slipping away again. His expression, despite the lack of panic screaming and begging, is eerily reminiscent of the first time Deku fell into his soul coma, whatever the fuck. Bakugo! Aizawa shouts, breathing hard. His footsteps are heavy as he stumbles into the room, and there's more commotion in the hallway that sounds a hell of a lot like the rest of the class is huddling around his door. Hold on, Deku, come on! He begs, his fingers tightening on Deku's shoulders as the nerd's face turns red and then a sickly shade of purple, spit gathering at the sides of his dry lips. He's still holding his breath, his diaphragm spasming under his ribs. Please! A shadow falls over both of them as Aizawa fills up the closet doorway. Katsuki throws a panicked, desperate glance over his shoulder to his teacher, begging him to fix this, to protect them, to save Deku, to save Katsuki because fuck, his chest aches, and he's so scared. He takes his eyes off the nerd for only a second, but that's long enough. Ch. Deku manages before his eyes roll in his head, and all of his limbs grow stiff and taut. Black whip wraps itself over Deku's arms, licking at his cheeks and neck like an excitable dog, and Katsuki can only think of his panic the first time this happened, of Black Whip tearing him open like a bleeding pig, and he's nauseous with rolling panic as his jaw works around silent assurances that he's not dying, he just needs to hold on. But no sound comes out no matter how hard he tries. Deku lets out a low moan before, all at once, the tension drops and Deku's head bobs as he shakes off the moment like it's nothing. He glances around the dark closet and knocks Katsuki's hands away with a flippant gesture before breaking into a wide grin, rolling his shoulders. Whoever is in Deku's body now stares down at the nerd's hands, turning them over and curling his fingers into fists over and over again like Nana had that first time in the concrete room. White noise buzzes in Katsuki's ears, and it sounds like rage. It sounds like he could blow up the whole world, that's how angry he is. He is cold all over, his fingers twitching where they rest against his thighs after Deku's hand knocked them away, and isn't that a sickly familiar metaphor for the two of them? Karma, cosmic revenge, fuck, he deserves this, and he swallows hard. He can't quite look Deku in the face, so he settles for looking just over his shoulder, where the wall is bare and shadowed. His eyes flutter as he blinks too quickly. He was just fucking here. He keens, not quite sure who he's talking to. Himself or the universe or Aizawa or whoever is wearing Deku's body like a prom dress. Deku feels so much like Katsuki is trying to cup water in his hands, but it all evaporates or streams out through his fingers no matter what he tries to do to stop it. He was here, and he was fine. Katsuki could cry. Instead, he lunges forward and wraps his hands around fistfuls of Deku's hair. It's greasy from their weeks in captivity and frizzy under his fingers, but he forces himself to hold on. In the doorway, Aizawa shouts wordlessly and moves to intervene, but Deku waves a hand in his direction and pauses. Katsuki heaves on his own breathing, and Deku's face is all wide eyes but no fear or surprise, even as Katsuki holds him at eye level, seething. He was fucking fine. Katsuki repeats, a stuck record. Maybe. The vestige agrees, nodding slowly like Katsuki is some sort of imbecile. Fuck these fucking vestiges. Katsuki will kill them. He'll explode them until there's nothing left of them. Or, he would if they didn't have Deku's fucking face. Katsuki growls low in his throat, and shakes Deku's head with the grip he has on his hair. He'll turn the vestiges into scrambled eggs. When the expression on his face doesn't so much as flinch or wince, some of Katsuki's guilt drains away. More anger comes to fill the empty space in his chest. I know he was fine for a second, kid. Katsuki lets the words simmer in the space between them. He's so close to Deku that he shares his oxygen. Any other time, it would be intoxicating to be so close. I'll fucking kill you! He roars, and his palms are hot with an oncoming explosion. He thrusts his hand toward Deku's face as his fingers glow like the red-hot coals in the bottom of a bonfire or like magma fresh out of a volcano. But he barely gets so far as to cover Deku's face with his own hand before Black Whip fills every inch and corner and crevice of the closet, knocking the door off its hinges and throwing Aizawa into the opposite wall. black whip wraps Katsuki into a strangling hold, slithering over him like a snake smothering its prey. His ribs creak under the pressure, and he gasps for air but doesn't stop fighting the hold, kicking even as the inky, astral ropes grow tighter and tighter. There's shrill wounded noise coming from somewhere in the closet, and it's sure as hell not coming out of Deku's mouth, not with the cocky-ass smirk that looks so odd where it's glued to his face. He levers himself off of the ground with more grace than Katsuki is used to associating with the nerd, brushing off the wrinkled hospital gown as Black Whip dances off of his body like ribbons. Aizawa picks himself off the ground next to Katsuki's unmade bed, cradling his ribs and gripping the edge of his overturned dresser for support. His face is drawn together in a determined expression that Katsuki recognizes from the USJ attack, his eyes dark and brow drawn low, and Katsuki sends him a pleading look at Black Whip tightens around him. He feels close to popping, like his insides might start oozing out of his ears or his nose in a thick paste if the pressure doesn't let up soon. Erase the fucking quirk, he pleads, but he doesn't have the air in him to say it out loud. He settles for opening and closing his mouth like a beached fish. Deku-kun! Round Cheeks cries from Katsuki's doorway. Her cheeks are flushed with panic, and her eyes are wide, and Katsuki can't imagine what the fuck is going through her head seeing Deku like this in Katsuki's closet of all places. Shitty hair appears beside hers, his skin a few shades too pale and his lips parted in shock. Octopus and raccoon eyes huddle together in the hallway, and it's only a matter of time before the rest of the class is here too to watch Katsuki get his ass handed to him. Katsuki grunts and grits his teeth as Black Whip tugs him forward and curls solidly around him as if vying for his attention. It works. Any thought Katsuki had to spare for their classmates and teacher are gone in a split second, replaced with Deku and nothing but Deku. He has Katsuki wrapped up like a captive, holding him at a level close enough that their noses brush when Katsuki forces himself to breathe. He can't get in more than half an inhale around the suffocating embrace of Deku's quirk. He has to cross his eyes to keep the nerd in focus, but Deku's eyes roam over his face, evaluating him, or memorizing his features. All at once, Black Whip disappears, and Katsuki drops into a heap on his closet floor. His laundry does little to cushion the fall, but he's up again after a split second, and he launches himself at Deku's face, one palm outstretched again now that the nerd can't defend himself with his stupid quirk. Instead, Aizawa's capture weapon catches him in the exact same way that Black Whip had the first time, albeit not even half as tightly. Katsuki lets out a cracking, frustrated scream. All he'd wanted was a good fucking night of sleep, and now he could tear out his hair if only he had the ability to move anything below his fucking shoulders. Fuck everything. Fuck you! He spits in Deku's face, and isn't that just so achingly familiar? The irony of it isn't lost on him. Who the fuck are you? Deku purses his lips and narrows his eyes, observing Katsuki again as Aizawa pulls him away, leaving a closet's worth of space between them. It's not a lot, but it's enough. Katsuki can no longer feel Deku's breath on the bottom half of his face, can no longer smell the sterile smell of the medical ward on the nerd mixed with his own smell. Katsuki draws in a deep breath to cleanse himself of it, of Deku. I am Daigoro, Deku greets, his face breaking out in a cocky grin. Fifth user of One for All, can't believe that Hermit Hikage got a turn out here before I did. He laughs a weird belly laugh that's reminiscent of All Might's laugh, and Katsuki cringes. It's been 3 weeks of watching other people live in Deku's body, and it never gets any less weird. God, if anything, it's only getting more weird the longer this bullshit goes on. At least Nana was bearable. This Daigoro guy kind of sucks, Katsuki thinks. And his ribs fucking hurt, not that anyone seems to care with how they keep wrapping him up like he's a Christmas present, or some shit. Yeah, Daigoro, and why the fuck are you here? Katsuki sneers, and it seems to take everyone in the room by surprise. Aizawa's capture weapon falters, and Daigoro furrows his brow, his lips parting. Bro, you can't just say that! Shitty Hair shouts as if this is Deku and not some stranger with a familiar face. They must think the nerd is losing his marbles. But Kugu, Cheeks admonishes, and he could kill them, but he doesn't want to take his eyes off Daigoro again. Why are you here? 'Cause Deku was just here, and he seemed awfully fine to me, talking and shit. He continues. So you should just fuck right off to whatever plane you exist on and let us get on with our fucking lives, idiot. He struggles against the firm pressure of Aizawa's scarf, but it's half-hearted at best. He hopes that no one in the room catches the pleading undertone to his gruff demand. You're all fucking Deku up. He's supposed to be in the fucking recovery ward recovering, but here he fucking is. He jerks his chin toward Deku, all knobbly knees and bruises. He's lost too much weight in the time since they were kidnapped, and it shows now as he stands as tall as he can in the corner of Katsuki's closet. He looks too young despite the unfamiliar, aged shine in his eye. You know nothing, kid, Daigoro scoffs, crossing his arms over his chest. Nine's soul is still structurally weak. You have no idea what that girl did to him. How much she strangled and warped and fractured his soul, and you have no idea how long something like that takes to heal. Certainly not a few weeks. That short visit you two had was dangerous. He mutters something under his breath about star-crossed lovers and annoying teenagers, and Katsuki flushes, his cheeks hot. He rolls his eyes and shifts against Aizawa's scarf. His soul or whatever the fuck has obviously healed enough. He didn't die. He didn't explode on the fucking spot. We were fine, he was fine, Katsuki insists. No one knows Deku better than him, he's sure, not even Deku himself or the weirdos who live in his head. Daigoro steps forward, and he's obviously used to being more intimidating because the nerd is anything but. His expression would be withering if not for his wild hair and freckled cheeks and chipped tooth. Anything could break Nine's spirit right now, kid. The smallest thing. He is weak. Nothing can break Deku's spirit. Katsuki denies at the same time, talking louder so his voice layers over Daigoro's. You'd be surprised. Silence reigns, the small closet heavy with it. Katsuki matches Daigoro's glare. You think you know him so well? Katsuki rolls his eyes. You can't even say his name. It's Izuku, by the way, and if you're gonna wear his face, you're sure as hell gonna call him by the right name. He runs his eyes over Daigoro's wavering form. He sways from foot to foot and shifts uncomfortably like his body is too small. And you can barely fucking stand up straight. This vessel is smaller than I'm used to. He defends, a thin blush dusting Deku's cheeks. And I have been in the plane of one for all for nearly 4 decades by now. It is a steep learning curve to be a physical body again. How can I expect you, the one who can't walk in a straight fucking line, to keep Deku safe if he needs it? Huh! You talk so much of protecting Nine, but you won't trust us vestiges. We know him best, better than you or Eight or his own mother. We know best how to keep him safe because we were the only ones there for him for so long, protecting him. Not you, us. Daigoro slams a fist into the wall of Katsuki's closet and lets the words simmer like hot, burning coals between them. In the hallway, one of their classmates draws in a gasping breath. Katsuki swallows hard and finally looks away. Daigoro is right. Fuck. Katsuki thinks of the war and the beaten down, weary look on Deku's face for months after they brought him back. Had he confided in the vestiges? Had they protected him when Katsuki was too weak to do so? Old man, Katsuki murmurs without looking at the man. Let me down. He tugs at the bottom of the capture scarf, the material unyielding. Are you going to attack Midoriya? Katsuki says nothing and scowls to himself. Still, the capture weapon unravels, leaving Katsuki almost dizzy as he stands on his own 2 feet. We are going to take Midoriya back to the recovery ward. Without looking at where the class lingers in the doorway, he continues. I expect all of you to be sitting in your seats and reading Chapter 7 of your Ethics and Heroism textbooks when I return. Do not make me expel any of you today, it's been a rough enough morning. Aizawa sure as hell looks the part of a rough morning. His scarf is looped around his neck, and he tucks the bottom half of his face into it, but his hair is frizzy and unkempt, and he's in a pair of threadbare UA sweatpants and a cat t-shirt. He looks like he rolled out of bed and came straight to knocking down Katsuki's bedroom door. In the hallway, the whole class groans, and complaints overlap in a jumbled mass of words. Still, his classmates wander off to get ready, leaving Katsuki, Aizawa, and Daigoro alone in Katsuki's warzone of a dorm room. Aizawa wraps a hand around Deku's bicep and tugs him out of the closet. His shoulder brushes Katsuki's as he passes, but Daigoro doesn't so much as spare him a second glance, the fucker, and Katsuki is left standing in the middle of his closet in his uniform from yesterday, rumpled with sleep. He should go back to sleep. But Kugu! Aizawa beckons, stopping as he aids Daigoro's uncoordinated limbs over the leg of Katsuki's dresser. Are you coming? Katsuki nods, and they leave the chaos of his room as it is in favor of starting the long, morning-chilled walk across campus. Katsuki walks behind Aizawa and Daigoro, scuffing the toe of his shoe against the sidewalk and cursing Hikage for forcing Deku to make this journey in the middle of the night, alone and unassisted. His mind conjures up the image of Deku stumbling over his own 2 feet as he hurried across campus and scaled the fucking Heights Alliance building to his 4th-floor balcony. It's a wonder Hikage didn't accidentally brain the nerd. Fuck these vestiges for real. But Daigoro's words echo in his mind. We know best how to keep him safe because we were the only ones there for him for so long, protecting him. Not you. Katsuki scoffs to himself, and stuffs his fists deep into his pockets to avoid blowing the asshole sky high. The medical ward is abandoned when they arrive, the lights on and the door unlocked but strangely devoid of anyone, even Recovery Girl. Recovery Girl came in to check on Midoriya this morning. Aizawa explains as he opens the door to the room they left Nana in last time Katsuki was in the ward. But she called an alarm when she couldn't find him. We thought he'd either been kidnapped again by a sleeper of that group of villains, or he woke up alone and confused and wandered off to find help, so all staff were to be on alert or searching campus for either Midoriya or any suspicious persons. That's why you were trying to break down my fucking door? Katsuki asks. 'Cause you thought if I was gone too, you'd figure out what happened? Aizawa pauses and mulls this over before nodding once, a decisive movement that Katsuki can only return with another nod. Aizawa assists Daigoro in getting back into the hospital bed. He has to lift one of the nerd's skinny ankles when Daigoro gets it caught on the side of the bed frame. The sheets are thrown back like Hikage had left in a hurry last night. Thinking back to the state he'd been in on Katsuki's balcony, that's probably an understatement. Daigoro settles in the bed, crossing his hands over his middle and sighing. He closes his eyes like he's going to sleep, and Aizawa leaves him with the promise that Recovery Girl would return as soon as the staff finished their patrol of campus. Aizawa closes the door behind himself as he trails Katsuki into the hallway. They stand in heavy silence for a moment, Katsuki's back to his teacher, before he turns on his heel and presses himself into Aizawa's chest, clutching at his ratty pajama t-shirt, without warning. 2 hands rise to rest on Katsuki's shoulder and on the back of his head, holding him in place but not holding him down. The touch is comforting as Katsuki heaves on a warbling sob that takes him by surprise. Big, fat tears soak the fabric of his teacher's shirt, and his nose is running like a fucking faucet. He sniffles, ugly and forceful enough that his sinuses ache, but Aizawa only holds him tighter. He's cried more times in the past month than probably in his entire life since infancy combined, and he wants it to stop. He hates it. Crying makes his face itchy and swollen and too hot, and he is so bone-weary tired of the scooped out and hollow feeling it always leaves in its wake. He scrubs at his face in the scratchy fabric of Aizawa's t-shirt, uncaring of how vulnerable and terrible this is. I don't know why I'm fucking crying," Katsuki says, his voice tilting up at the end like it's a question. It's muffled in Aizawa's chest. "I'm so tired and I miss Deku, and I want him back, but he was right there, and then he wasn't, and it's this asshole." He sobs, and he's so out of control that it hurts, and his chest aches. Aizawa pats the back of his head and hums, but he doesn't say anything. Nothing he could have said would fix this, and Katsuki is glad that he stays quiet. He thinks he'd explode if he got any empty condolences right now. "I miss Deku," he repeats, over and over again, and he sinks to his knees in the middle of the medical ward hallway, pulling Aizawa down with him. Deku comes back to himself in snatches like blinks or like fasting moving movie frames. Katsuki is simultaneously there for more of it than he'd like to be and not often enough at all, in the weeks of Deku's supposed recovery, supposed because Deku isn't himself most of the time. Even still, he makes himself a rank list of the vestiges from his least favorite to his favorite. It kind of sucks, like major ass if he's honest. Katsuki kicks open the 1A Heights Alliance front door, one hand wrapped achingly tight around the strap of his backpack. He grunts, and silence greets him. He's the first one back from class because the other extras linger after the last bell while he makes a fucking break for the dorms like someone lit his ass on fire. He wants to get out of his fucking uniform before he escapes to Deku's bedside in the medical ward again, where no one will bother him until he returns, and his skin itches with the need to be alone, or as alone as he ever is in Deku's room. After another week of this bullshit, and no new appearances of the nerd, not since that morning in Katsuki's closet, he's fallen into somewhat of a comfortable routine. For 2 weeks, almost a month now since the two of them were kidnapped, Katsuki has spent every waking hour of his free time at Deku's bedside like those pansy-ass fools in the English classical novels Yamada-sensei makes them read. Between his morning workouts and class, he's in the medical ward. After class, he takes his homework and does it in the plastic seat next to Deku's bed, the armrest still warped in the shape of his hand from that time recovery girl almost sent him into a total meltdown after he woke up the first time. He can't leave Deku alone in that stupid sterile room, but more than that, he doesn't want to, can't miss it when, if, the nerd wakes up in his body again, so he sits around in this chair that makes his back ache like hell, and he watches the nerd like a fucking hawk. Maybe it's creepy. Or maybe it's obsessive, but not even recovery girl, the stubborn old bitch, tries to kick him out anymore, not since that first afternoon after the whole closet thing. She knows, by now, to tell him what she's doing to the nerd and how it's somehow, hopefully going to fix him, and most of it is medical jargon which goes so far over Katsuki's head, but it's noise to fill the space, so he doesn't care. When she's not in the room, he mutters unintelligibly under his breath or hums, or whichever vestige who decides to grace Katsuki with their presence rattles on about nothing into the emptiness of the room. Dead people are surprisingly chatty. He hates it, this new routine. It feels too much like sitting around and doing nothing, which he hates more than anything else, and he's admittedly a pretty hateful guy. He gets halfway to the elevators, brushing past the dark living room and the kitchen, cursing whoever left the blinds closed this morning because the shadows are nothing if not eerie as fuck, and it was probably Dunce-Face's job. He kicks at one of the dining room chairs to burn the edge off of his restless, itching energy, and it clatters against the table and shrieks on the wooden floor, but there is no one in the dorm to complain about the unnecessary noise he's making. Except a groan comes from the couch, and Katsuki freezes mid-step, tripping over himself and only narrowly catching himself on the edge of the table. He gapes at the back of the couch, tense all over and preparing for a fight. Considering some of the stupid-ass villains they've fought this year, he really wouldn't be so surprised if one of them broke in and took a nap on their couch. A head of wild green curls pops up over the edge of the couch, and Deku stares back at him, squinting against even the dim light of the common room. He rubs a clumsy hand over his face with a wordless mumble. "Kaken?" he asks, squinting harder. He rubs his face again like he can't believe what he's seeing when, really, it's Katsuki who should be shocked. And he damn well is shocked. Just yesterday, he was slouched over in that stupid, blue-tinted chair while Deku stared at the ceiling, blinking too slowly and not saying a word. Katsuki hadn't known who, exactly, was residing behind those eyes, but he had spent hours running his eyes over the nerd's profile in changing light, over the sharp slope of his nose and his thick eyelashes and the gauntness of his stupid, freckled cheeks. He'd spent so long staring at the nerd that he'd had to bullshit his way through his hero ethics and English assignments this morning before class. And now the nerd was here, peeking over the back of the couch in the common room like it's the most normal thing in the world. There are dark smudges under his eyes, smeared from the inside corners on either side of his nose to the middle of his pupils. They only make the green of his eyes more apparent, and they make him look sick and dying. "Nerd?" Katsuki breathes, still frozen and gripping the edge of the dining table hard enough that his knuckles hurt. It feels like the only thing keeping him from floating away or collapsing to his knees, which would be fucking embarrassing. He forces himself to unravel his hold on the table, and he steps away from the kitchen and into the living room, his movements jerky and robotic. Deku's hand creeps over the edge of the couch cushion, and he ducks his head like he's shy. "Hi, Kaken," he murmurs, and Katsuki can hear the smile. "Deku," he chokes out like it's the only thing he can say. It might be, honestly. "What are you?" But that comes out too soft, too vulnerable, and he doesn't want Deku to get the wrong idea, doesn't want him to think Katsuki got weak or anything in his absence. They're still rivals, always. So he clears his throat and tries again, but Deku's eyes sparkle like he knows what Katsuki is thinking. His fingers twitch against the couch in a way that says rivals, always. "Fuck are you doing out of bed, nerd? Recovery girl gave me a kiss I think it was this morning. Was light out, but you weren't there." Katsuki flushes bright red at that but doesn't interrupt as the nerd tucks his face into the cushion and keeps muttering. "She made a comment about that it was about time I came around so she could heal me. And then she told me to stop taking up her beds, but the medical ward really didn't seem too busy when I left. But maybe there's a big training exercise coming up soon, huh, Kaken? But I left, and I came here, but I must have gotten too tired to make it upstairs cause next thing I remember, I'm here. On the couch. And you came in and kicked the chair, and I think you were cursing out Kaminari for some reason?" Deku blinks up at him, seemingly unperturbed about Katsuki's odd silence. Katsuki stares at the nerd, lips parted because this exchange is so painfully normal, but it's not because Katsuki is also so painfully aware. He's so aware that at any moment, Deku is going to go stiff all over like he's being tossed over and over again, and then it won't be Deku on the couch, it'll be some other asshole. Any moment, and he's wasting the time he does have standing here gaping like an idiot. You're okay then?" he asks stupidly. The bruises that have been marring Deku's skin for the past month are all gone, no yellow-green edges, nothing, and his arms are curiously devoid of bandages for the first time since Katsuki himself woke up in the medical ward. He'd almost forgotten what Deku looked like without the ugly reminders of their kidnapping. Deku's expression softens under Katsuki's intense observation of him, and Katsuki wants to reach out and touch him to make sure this is real, but he keeps his hands firmly by his sides. "I'm all right, Kaken," Deku murmurs, blinking slowly and grinning. His tooth is still chipped, and it's the only lasting image of how he'd looked before. I'm really tired." He laughs and scratches at the back of his head. "The vestiges are so excited to be, alive again that they don't let my body rest as much as they probably should. And recovery girls kiss on top of that. I don't think I've ever been so tired in my life." Deku slumps into the couch, but he's still smiling like there's anything funny about this. Katsuki doesn't see the humor, but he lets it be. Maybe Katsuki did get weak in Deku's absence. God. Pansy ass. It's a split-second decision, but the words tumble off his tongue before he can think about them. "Come on then, shitty nerd." He turns on his heel and starts toward the elevator with his hands stuffed deep in his uniform pants pockets, leaving Deku to splutter behind him. "Huh! Kaken! Where are you going?" Katsuki stops after he presses the arrow next to the elevator doors, glancing at Deku over his shoulder. "You think you're gonna get any decent rest on the common room couch, nerd? I was too tired to get to my dorm." Deku mutters in a suffering tone, smushing his face between his hands. He slides off the couch and stumbles over his own 2 feet like a fucking baby deer on his way to meet Katsuki next to the elevator. "We're not going to your dorm," Katsuki answers, avoiding Deku's imploring gaze. "We're going to mine." He catches Deku by the elbow to keep the nerd from taking a nosedive into the living room floor, and the tips of his ears are hot with blush. Deku leans into him with a sigh. "Kaken's worried about me," he hums, sounding far too satisfied. He's practically fucking floating next to Katsuki. No, he really is floating. His toes barely leave the ground, and he's shaky in the air like when he first activated the quirk, but he definitely activated float. It doesn't look like the nerd even realizes he did it. "Oi! Feet on the fucking ground, nerd, Katsuki chastises. And I'm just trying to make sure you actually get some damn sleep, that's all. That's all, Kakin? Deku grins. His face is pale and sweaty like being awake is taking everything out of him, and Katsuki almost feels bad. Almost because he's also a selfish son of a bitch, and he doesn't want to stop talking to Deku, not so soon. That it. But Katsuki's face is hot, and he tightens his hold on the nerd's arm as the elevator takes them up to the 4th floor. Someone's gotta keep the fucking vestiges in check, Deku. The doors chime and slide open, and Katsuki all but carries Deku into the hallway. The nerd is flagging, and Katsuki grits his teeth. He waits for the feeling of flexing muscles under his hands, but it doesn't come even as he deposits Deku on his own bed. Mess, Kakin. Deku slurs, his eyes barely more than slits as he stares up at Katsuki, squinting up at Katsuki like he never wants to take his eyes off him. Katsuki doesn't think he'd mind that, really. His hair is splayed out across Katsuki's dark bedding, and Deku smacks his lips as scoots closer to the wall, leaving room for Katsuki next to him. Yeah, and whose fault is that? Katsuki snarks back while pulling back his sheets and arranging Deku under his comforter. Not fucking mine. Deku presses the side of his face into Katsuki's pillow and falls asleep between one breath and the next. Katsuki sits down on the edge of his bed and closes his eyes, listening to Deku's steady, even breathing. The nerd mumbles in his sleep, snuffling and shifting. He settles after a moment, and Katsuki must fall asleep at some point because when he opens his eyes again, it's not Deku behind those eyes. They're laying face to face, their noses almost touching, and the vestiges' eyes are open wide, watching Katsuki sleep. He jerks back and sits up so fast it makes him dizzy, breathing hard. The fuck, Ryu? He slurs, still half asleep. N. 6th. I don't fucking care which user you are. Katsuki bites, rubbing his hands over his face. He pauses, and silence reigns between him and the vestige, N. He points at the door. Get out. Bah! Get the fuck out! He yells, and he ignores the way Deku's sleep-warm skin brushes against his as he climbs out of the bed. He closes the door with a soft click, and Katsuki curls into the spot of warmth left in his wake, and it smells like Deku. Katsuki hunches over his desk, his legs crossed on his chair and his pencil tapping at the last question on his hero ethics homework. State one moral issue caused by quirks that was exacerbated by the rise of mainstream heroism as a career. He chews on his lip and scrapes his nails along the back of his neck in thought. His back and knees are starting to ache from being in this position for so long, but he doesn't bother shifting. Fuck his joints. He's got math and Japanese history homework to do after this worksheet, and it seems sort of like more effort than it's worth. Plus, it's boring as fuck. Behind him, the sun sets in his balcony windows, casting lengthening shadows over his shoddily repaired dorm room. There's still a dent in the wall where his weight crashed into the plaster, and his dresser wobbles precariously when he closes the drawers too hard. His closet still doesn't have a door on it, and if he walks around without slippers on, little pieces of rubble and chipped paint stick to the soles of his feet, no matter how many times he's vacuumed, which is annoying as hell. He still hasn't managed to put all of his shirts back on their hangers. He sighs and runs his hand over his hair, racking his brain for any single moral issue, like, ever. At this point, he just wants to be done and collapse face down on his bed and remain like that until his alarm goes off in the morning. Maybe he'll suffocate and die in his sleep. Because isn't that the dream? He jots down an answer, quirk discrimination, fuck this, and fumbles for his math binder with a grumbled curse under his breath. He'd been distracted during class, thinking about Deku and how he'd need to get caught up again after all of this, just like after the war, and he can only hope he managed to write down the homework for himself. He drops his binder when there's a hesitant tap, tap, tap on the window behind him, a human-shaped shadow imposing itself on the wall in front of Katsuki, a looming figure that he traces the outline of with his eyes. The edges of the shadow are fuzzy, and the person shifts out of direct sunlight before he can identify whoever it is. He freezes, tense all over and wishing he'd had the energy to close his curtains when he got back from class, because whoever is on his balcony knows everything about the layout of his room, about Katsuki's position, and he's at a severe disadvantage here. Katsuki always does better under pressure anyway. He likes a challenge, and he's nothing if not a winner. He formulates a brief plan in his head: defensive position, identify attacker, go from there. And maybe it's not a plan Aizawa would be thrilled about if he knew, but it's the best Katsuki's got at his disposal right now. He grips the edge of his desk and uses it as a push-off point to vault over the back of his chair, landing in a crouched position facing his door, his palms outstretched and all but dripping with his explosive sweat, raised and ready for an all-out brawl. Part of him is itching for a good, high-stakes fight. Sparring isn't the same if it's not with Deku. Everything feels different. Everything feels high stakes with Deku. Without him, without his eyes on Katsuki, hero training feels lackluster and kind of lame. Katsuki burns with pent-up energy buzzing under the first layer of his skin. That part simultaneously dies a little and lights itself on fire at the sight of the person on the other side of his balcony door. Katsuki really isn't sure what he thought he'd see: Robobitch, that crispy motherfucker from the League, or maybe some new asshole who wants to try their hand at being fucking stupid, but he gapes at Deku, dropping his defensive stance with few dramatics. He's crouched so his head brushes the top of the railing outlining Katsuki's balcony, his eyes wide and flitting about as if looking for some unseen threat, and he taps at the window again with the tip of his index finger even as Katsuki makes eye contact with him. His other hand reaches for the doorknob, but Katsuki knows it's locked. He checked and double-checked before he fell asleep last night. Deku jiggles the knob, his eyes flicking pointedly between Katsuki and the balcony door, a clear request. Katsuki groans and covers his face with both of his hands, the sound muffled in his palms. Fuck this, for real, fuck this and everything about it. He sends a torn look to his desk, his abandoned math binder spilling out over his floor under his desk, the papers disjointed and scattered and full of his own chicken scratch. He curses under his breath again, and Deku's tapping grows more frantic and desperate. The nerd peeks over the edge of the balcony railing at the sinking sun, which is barely a sliver over the horizon. The movement is paranoid, and so unlike Deku but still somehow so familiar that Katsuki holds his breath and hesitates with his hand over the lock on his balcony door. Haikage is one annoying motherfucker. Katsuki doesn't want to deal with another closet incident, not when he hasn't recovered from the last one. He looks between his chaotic room and Haikage's pleading, jittery eyes. His pupils are dilated with fear, and his hands are shaking as he continues to tap his fingertip against the thick glass. As far as Katsuki knows, Deku and the vestiges have kept mostly to the nerd's dorm room. Before now, Katsuki hadn't seen him since he kicked Den out of his own room in the middle of the night, and part of him is glad. Part of him, the other part misses the nerd's stupid face or whatever, even if it means interacting with the even stupider vestiges. Still, he hasn't sought Deku out, not after last time. He'd gone to sleep next to Deku and then he'd woken up next to someone else, and it feels like a betrayal, except he can't figure out if it's on his own behalf or on Deku's. Fuck this. It's all so confusing, and he already has a blooming headache from his ethics homework. Katsuki stares down at Haikage, and he hates the expression he puts on Deku's face, so he unlocks the door and opens it a crack, only enough for Katsuki to stick his face out into the cooling dusk air. Haikage tries to bully his way in by throwing one of Deku's skinny shoulders into the door, but Katsuki has always been bigger than Deku, especially now, when Recovery Girl practically has to bully the vestiges into drinking protein shakes to sustain the nerd's body. Katsuki grunts, but he holds steady, rolling his eyes as Haikage rubs his shoulder, pouting. Don't suppose you know jack shit about calculus? Katsuki snarks. Haikage looks at him from under Deku's lashes, and Katsuki squints at him. It's an obvious manipulation. The vestiges have found his weak spot, Deku's face, Deku himself, and they're exploiting it, he knows. The worst part is, it fucking works. He opens the door a fraction wider with a put-upon sigh, and Haikage pushes past him into the room. Stay away from my fucking closet! Katsuki shouts as he catches sight of Hikage eyeing the space. He grabs him by the collar of the shirt he's wearing, the same one he'd been wearing the last time Katsuki saw Deku wearing days ago, and forces Hikage to look at him. What do you want this time? There are eyes all over Nine's room. It's not safe, it's not. He shakes his head, and Deku's curls, frizzy and wild, fall over his forehead. Yeah, probably because it's a fucking All Might shrine. For once, Katsuki doesn't blame Hikage for his paranoia. He's never been able to stand around in Deku's room for more than a minute without getting creeped the fuck out by all the All Might posters on the walls. Still, he shakes Hikage, and he flails awkwardly in Katsuki's hold. Why do you keep coming here? He asks, and Hikage opens his mouth to answer, but Katsuki interrupts him. No, I don't give a shit about that. Did you scale 2 fucking floors to get here from Deku's room? Hikage mutters, refusing to meet Katsuki's eye as he suddenly finds interest in the dent in his wall, and that's all the answer Katsuki needs. He shakes him again with a growl. Fucking, use the front door! He keeps shaking him until Hikage looks vaguely nauseous. Hallway, elevator, my door! Oh my god! He drops the vestige in a seasick heap in the middle of his floor and steps over him, gathering his math papers up into a neater pile and replacing them in his binder pocket, scowling the entire time. He mutters under his breath, idiot, dumbass motherfucker, putting Deku in danger like that, just use the stairs like a normal person. God. Since when did he become a fucking vestige babysitter? Katsuki is cooking for himself, and it's dark out. The sun hasn't risen yet, so the common room is cool and silent beyond his own sizzling pan. He watches the oil pop angrily, but his arms are so heavy with exhaustion and sore from class, he's been working himself harder than normal, maybe too hard, because it takes the edge off of his restless energy that seems to revolve around the nerd, and if he gets stronger, maybe Deku will come back sooner, spurred on by his own competitive nature, that he can only stand in the dimness of the oven light and watch his food cook. He should stir it. He stares, his head bowed and fingers twitching at his sides. Someone slides out a chair at the closest table behind him, but Katsuki doesn't turn. There is only one other person who is ever up and vertical this time of day, and lately that's been because the vestiges don't sleep. Whoever is here to greet him this morning, to ruin his day before it's even fucking begun, settles into the chair, and he can see it so clearly in his mind's eye. Deku's scarred arms crossed in front of him, his chin resting on them as he watches Katsuki's back through his curtain of thick curls. And he'll be wearing a threadbare t-shirt that says something stupid and nerdy, and he'll be warm to the touch despite the chill in the air. Katsuki doesn't turn around. He finally raises his spatula and jabs at his food to keep the edges from burning any more than they already have. He takes another plate out of the cabinet next to his head, feeling Deku's eyes on him. It lights him up like a fucking torch, and maybe he's starting to get a little obsessive. Chances are, it's not even Deku sitting at the table. Hikage might have gotten restless as the sun started to rise and found Katsuki's room empty. He thought, at first, that Hikage found solitude from danger sense in Katsuki's room because it was refuge from the prying eyes on Deku's walls, but now he's not so sure. The vestige seems to seek Katsuki himself out, the fucking weirdo. It's probably not Daigoro at the table. He never shuts his damn trap, and Nana would have come over and tried to take over Katsuki's place at the stove. There are others he knows, that he hasn't even met yet, but he can't imagine a reason why they'd come out now, in the middle of the night, to watch Katsuki cook. He takes his pan off the burner and divides the food onto the 2 plates. It steams moisture over his forearms as he adds salt and the other things he knows Deku likes to eat on his food. He turns, finally, but he doesn't look at the nerd, who is resting his head on the nest of his arms, just like Katsuki imagined, as he sets down the plate with the larger serving in front of him. Eat, he commands, gruff and unyielding. He'll shove the food down the vestige's throat if he has to, but Deku is getting too thin. They're letting all of the nerd's hard work go to waste. The vestige looks up at him through his hair and his eyelashes, his eyes bright in the shadows of the common room, but he shifts after a moment, lifting himself off the table and picking up the chopsticks Katsuki threw at him. Thanks, Kaken. he murmurs, ducking his head in gratitude before digging in. Deku eats like Katsuki is about to take the food away from him, and it's ugly. There's food on the corner of Deku's mouth and grease on his chin, and Katsuki gapes at him as his own food cools before him. Hold the fuck, Deku? He sputters, and Deku pauses in shoveling food into his face only long enough to glance at him and nod. How long has it been you? Deku swallows a mouthful of food and wipes his mouth on the back of his hand like a total heathen. It was always me. He cocks his head, blinking. I was just awake in my room. I don't think I was asleep before, but then I was awake, you know, and I just couldn't be in my room anymore because hikage was so loud, so I came down here. And here you were. His face breaks into a wide grin like Katsuki being in the common room was the best thing to ever happen to him. Thank you for the food, Kaken. It's good. He stuffs another mouthful of food into his cheeks as if to prove how good it is. I know it's good, nerd, but you don't gotta fucking inhale it. Katsuki gripes, but he looks away and can only hope the dimness of the room hides his blush. Slow down before you choke and die because I won't save you if you do. Course. Deku answers, but they both know it's a bold-faced fucking lie. Katsuki clicks his tongue and finally digs into his own plate. He watches Deku out of the corner of his eye as he eats. They both finish before the sun is more than a sliver over the horizon. Katsuki takes their plates to the sink and washes them without a word. Usually, he would insist Deku do the dishes since Katsuki cooked, but he forces the nerd back into his seat when he tries to get up. Do they bother you? Katsuki asks, once again standing with his back to Deku. The vestiges, what does it feel like? Usually it's like they're talking, but it's on the other side of a door or a wall so I can ignore them pretty easily. But that girl, the one who, she knocked down that wall, and they're all so loud in my head all the time. And sometimes I close my eyes and open them again, and I don't remember what I was doing or how I got there, and I can tell time has passed, but I don't know how much. Deku runs a hand over his face and leans back in his chair. And they only sort of get along with each other. Most of them were mentors to the others, but they don't have to listen to each other anymore. Like, Hikage really likes Kaken, and Danger Sense just. When Katsuki chances a look over his shoulder, the nerd is blushing, and Deku coughs to cut himself off. But Daigoro insists he's just being a weirdo recluse like he was when he was alive, so they fight. Loudly. And often. He huffs out a laugh, but it's almost humorless. I think they're all a little tender over the fact that none of them could beat All for One, you know. Yeah, Katsuki says, but he doesn't really understand it at all. He has his head to himself, and he's never had to fight a generations-old supervillain before. He only does it because Deku has to. He lets the silence stretch between them. Deku sighs again and rests his forehead on the surface of the table. I think I want to go back to class, he murmurs, muffled by the angle. Aizawa-sensei mentioned it to me and I think it's a good idea. Are you sure, Deku? Katsuki asks, hiding his own hesitance in full focus on scrubbing at a clean spot on one of the plates. Deku hums. I don't want to get too far behind. Nerd, Katsuki snorts. I'll help you get caught up again anyway. He rolls his eyes even though Deku can't see him. He had thought that much was obvious. He imagines the future where he's catching Deku up to speed, and Deku is smiling at him from the other side of the table as they work, and it's normal because Deku is himself again, for real this time. No bated breath waiting for someone else to take the reins on his body. It's normal, but it's cheesy as fuck, and Katsuki's chest feels tight at the thought of it, so he pushes it right the hell away. The lack of sleep is getting to him, that's what he blames it on. Fucking Hikage. I want to be in class with everyone again though, Deku says, chewing the fingernail on his thumb thoughtfully. Getting better always. And I trust the vestiges to take good notes for me. They've all gotten through heroism before, so high school should be a breeze, right? Yeah, famous fucking last words if you ask Katsuki. Daigoro just loves the school day. He sits behind Katsuki most days now, instead of any of the more bearable vestiges, not that there's many of them, leaning back in Deku's chair and humming to himself, Mostly old stuff that Katsuki has only ever heard his grandparents listen to, the fucking old fart. It's annoying. And he never takes any fucking notes, so Katsuki makes sure he takes the best notes of his life for when Deku is around to study them. To hell with the vestiges. Deku will see that Katsuki is infinitely better than them, and Katsuki will be number one as per fucking always. He smirks down at his notebook, but it drops into a scowl when his desk rattles as Daigoro kicks at the leg of his seat. Are you a fucking kid? Katsuki hisses, glaring at Daigoro over his shoulder. The sight of him is disconcerting, Deku leaning back in his chair enough that he throws shadows over Great Perv's desk, a cocky smirk glued to his freckled cheeks as he chews on the nail of his thumb. His notebook is on the desk, but it's closed, untouched, and there's a pen next to it instead of Deku's usual pencil. Deku hates using pens in his notebooks. Crossing stuff out over and over again drives him nuts. Not that this asshole would know or care, not like Katsuki. Katsuki turns around in his seat and snatches the pen off the desk. On the slim chance Daigoro decides to prove himself useful for once, he'll need to use a pencil, damn it, and replaces it with his own pencil. Daigoro snickers into his hand, and Katsuki tightens his hold on the pen enough that the plastic creaks and protests, and he has to force himself to relax with one of the stupid breathing exercises his therapist taught him to keep himself from getting ink all over his perfectly good notes. His rage simmers as he clenches his jaw and refocuses on the lesson. For Deku, he tells himself. Focus for Deku. But it's so fucking difficult to keep his mantra going when Daigoro taps him on the shoulder like they're passing notes in grade school. The only thing they're missing is a pass note, and if Daigoro tries that, he will be exploded immediately, wearing Deku's face or not. He's sure the nerd would understand. He grits his teeth harder, and his molars ache like hell at the pressure. What do you want? He hisses under his breath. He's been trying to avoid Aizawa's wrath since his breakdown against the man in the medbay hallway, mostly so he doesn't have to look him in the face ever again. I'll let you in on a little secret, kid, Daigoro tells him in a voice that qualifies as a whisper under only the most liberal definition. Glasses shoots them both a scathing look, but Katsuki only sneers in return. It's not like he wants to be talking to this asshole either. You'll never use most of this, not as a hero. I don't fucking care. Katsuki scribbles down the example from the board, glancing between the front of the classroom and his notebook like a bobblehead. He's never taken such diligent, neat notes before in his life, and it's starting to make his hand cramp. What are you, some kind of nerd? Daigoro snorts. Katsuki feels the puffs of air on the back of his shoulder, and he has to close his eyes to keep from blowing up. Sure, he grits out, and his pen bleeds a dark puddle onto his page as he presses down with too much pressure. Sit the fuck down and focus, asshole. This isn't about you. He reaches over his shoulder and shoves at Daigoro's face until he falls back onto Deku's seat with an offended huff. I already know this stuff, Daigoro complains, twirling the pencil Katsuki gave him between two of his fingers. I don't need to focus or take notes, I'll just take the test, and I'll ace it. He shrugs, and his cocky expression is what does Katsuki's temper in. He stands up too fast, his chair screeching on the tiled floor and his palms smoking against the surface of his desk. His chest heaves, and the class goes totally silent around him, all of them watching without breathing. A tense moment passes. You won't fucking be here for the test, asshole, Katsuki insists, spinning on his heel to look Daigoro in the eye. The vestige doesn't so much as blink twice at Katsuki looming over him, his palms crackling. Sure I will. 9 is still healing, kid. Daigoro clicks his tongue like Katsuki is nothing more than a stupid kid, and he falls out of his desk when Katsuki finally snaps. He's on top of Daigoro in an instant, all of his hero training paying off in his speed while Daigoro still struggles to walk straight in Deku's body. He winds up for a punch, his knees on either side of Deku's ribcage, but one of Ectoplasm's clones wraps its arms around his own chest and pulls him away before Katsuki can do anything. He bites back a frustrated scream, but he doesn't fight the hold. Deku fucking trusted you, asshole. He spits, glaring down at Daigoro where he is prone on the classroom floor. There is so much else he wants to say, But not here, and not to Daigoro, so he slithers out of Ectoplasm's hold and allows himself to be escorted out of the room and to Nise's office. Katsuki has tried to attack Daigoro both times he's ever spoken to him, and somehow, he's still only third on Katsuki's list of his least favorite vestiges. It's just fucking sad. He scowls at the ground and burns up inside with loathing. For Daigoro, for everyone. For himself. Nise suspends him. House arrest. But not even at the dorms like normal. The rat spouts some bullshit about a new, fresh environment and the gentle healing hold of parents. As if the old hag would ever be gentle. Or healing. Or holding. They send him home, where he can avoid his parents' attempts to talk it out with him as well as Shitty Hair's numerous texts about it. About how it wasn't manly to attack Mito in the middle of class like that, as if Katsuki doesn't already know that. He sits in his bedroom and seethes, his door locked and his phone muted. But on the third day of house arrest, Katsuki's anger breaks into pieces like a dropped puzzle, and he finds himself laying in his bed, the sheets stale with disuse like his dorm room after he got back, and he stares at his ceiling. His limbs are starfished across the bed, and his chest is heavy with the weight of gravity, or maybe something else. He keeps his blinds drawn and his lamp off, and he stews in the quiet darkness. He chews his bottom lip until it's chapped and aching, and his eyes burn. The memory of tackling Deku to the ground in the middle of class, his body firm and solid between his knees as he prepared to beat his face in, plays over and over in his mind's eye like a nightmare, the worst nightmare he's ever had because waking up makes it worse, somehow. More vivid. He can't escape it, but Katsuki thinks he must deserve it. He knows he deserves it, and he can almost hear Daigoro's satisfaction, his chortling, victorious laughter. Maybe that asshole was right. Fuck, Katsuki hates to concede anything to him of all people, but he'd attack Deku without a second thought. He was no better than a scummy fucking villain with his temper, no better than he was a few years ago. Maybe nothing had changed and he would always be a bully, the enemy, everything he no longer wanted to be. Maybe it was too late for him, and he would always be the worst thing for Deku. Fuck. Damn it. Katsuki clutches at his duvet and drags in a hissing breath through his teeth, closing his eyes so he doesn't have to see how terrible he is anymore. Instead, he sees Deku's face. Him in middle school, beaten so deep into his shell that it aches for Katsuki to think about, my fault, and him now, smiling, and him on the classroom floor. Daigoro's expression hadn't been surprised. He had expected Katsuki to break, to attack Deku. The asshole had pushed for it, sure, but Katsuki should have been stronger. Better. He keeps fucking up. The war, this. We know best how to keep him safe because we were the only ones there for him for so long, protecting him. Not you. Not you no diaonotai not you. Katsuki gags and chokes, scrambling for the waste bin next to his desk. He spits up only a mouthful of sour-tasting spit that pools behind his teeth. Gah, Daigoro was right. Katsuki needed to trust the vestiges to take care of Deku because obviously Katsuki wasn't good enough. He'd let Deku get kidnapped, let him run away, and he'd bruised and scarred him more than the villains they fought. What a fucking asshole. Katsuki doesn't know if he's insulting Daigoro or himself anymore. He growls and drops his wastebasket before curling up on his side to stare at his wall instead of his ceiling. What was it Nise said about a change of scenery? His wall is covered with pictures, some from when he was a brat, and others from his time at UA. There is one of him and Deku and no one else, and it is taped to the center of the wall, where it is cluttered enough to be hidden in case his old hag suddenly feels like cleaning him room. If the layer of dust he'd found on all of his shit when this house arrest started is anything to go by, that is rarely, if ever, but his eyes find the picture like its muscle memory. The edges of the photograph are soft, and he has to keep a roll of tape in the top drawer of his desk with how often he takes it down to cradle it in his hands. It's from after the war. Dunt's face got into a phase of taking pictures of everything and everyone all the time, and Katsuki had feigned annoyance at it, but he understood more than he'd admit even if someone put a gun to his head. He's forgotten the fine details of some people's faces already. He and Deku are in their hero costumes in the picture, both of them matted with sweat and grime. Katsuki is prone on the ground in the middle of the full wreckage of one of the training grounds, and he'd had bruises upon bruises after that training exercise, and Deku is standing over him with a radiant, playful grin. The nerd reaches one hand down to help him up off the ground. The picture has the moment frozen in time, the one where Katsuki reaches for his hand without a second thought. He remembers the feeling of Deku's gloved hand in his own, how he wished their costumes weren't so damn practical so he could feel Deku's crooked fingers and rugged scars. But his palm was wide and warm, and his grip was firm. Deku helped him off the ground and didn't think twice about it. Now, Katsuki brushes his thumb over the nerd's face and his outstretched hand. He chews on his lip in thought, Daigoro's cocky voice mocking him despite the emptiness of his room. "Fuck," he mutters to himself, and he lets the photograph drop onto his bedroom floor. It stares up at him, and it's just another thing to mock him for thinking he could be better. He presses his face into his sheets. He lays there like that until he can hear the hag and his dad milling about in their kitchen, making dinner together. Pots and pans clang together, and he knows they're talking about him because he can't even hear the hag's abrasive-ass voice through his door. He closes his eyes and curls into a tighter ball, and wonders what they could be saying. If he could ignore everything about why he's here and the heavy weight on his chest, it would almost be serene. The Bakuga house is never serene, which is exactly why something has to ruin it. Usually, that is Katsuki or the hag. Today, it is a series of loud crashes that send Katsuki's instincts into overdrive. He sits up in bed, straining his ears and moving slowly out of his bed, trying to assess the threat. His dad yells wordlessly, and the hag drops a plate with a matching yell. Katsuki cracks open his door and sticks his head out, then a hand, palms heating readily. Light from the stairwell invades the hallway, and he creeps toward the commotion. If there are villains in his living room, he's going to kill them, and then that stupid fucking rat who thought it was such a good idea to send him home instead of keeping him in the dorms. His parents don't deserve to get attacked because he couldn't keep his temper in check. Their voices are muffled by the distance, but he can hear their nervous, soothing tones. He moves slowly, avoiding the creaky step and craning to get a good look at what he's up against. He sees his dad first, his eyes wide and cheeks pale with terror. He holds up both of his hands in a placating gesture as he steps toward the living room, leaving the hag next to the stove. She presses herself against the counter, and her hands are shaking where she grips the edge. "It's okay," his dad tells the intruder, his voice shaking but soft and unobtrusive, and he's still moving toward whoever is in their fucking house, and he hasn't seen Katsuki yet with how focused he is on getting into the living room. Katsuki wants to tell him to get the hell away, to leave the intruder to Katsuki because he's trained in combat, but he doesn't want to give himself away before he can figure out how to win this. "It's okay." Katsuki presses his chest flat to the stairs, and he finally gets a good look at their living room. It's a mess, the television overturned and the front door hanging open, and it must be raining because there is a trail of water from their front door to the other side of the couch, where Deku is pressing himself against the wall under their family portrait, his chest heaving and Quirk firing on and off like a caged, cornered animal. His hair is plastered to his head, and his eyes move between Katsuki's parents like he doesn't recognize them. "Izuku," the hag murmurs, and she steps away from the counter. She must move too fast, though, because the nerd makes a choked, panic sound, and green lightning illuminates their living room. She flinches back, and Katsuki finally moves. He stumbles the rest of the way down the stairs, caution thrown to hell, and he places himself between his parents and Deku. "It's not him," Katsuki barks. "Get the fuck step back." His voice is high and frantic, and he'd never get away with talking to his parents like this in any other situation, but his dad retreats to the hag's side without protest. Katsuki turns his back on them and focuses instead on the nerd. "How did you get here, Haikage?" Kaken," Deku sobs, and the fight goes out of his body between one breath and the next. Katsuki's shoulders drop in surprise as the nerd slides down the wall and curls into himself on the floor. He leaves a wet streak on the paint in his wake, and he's not even wearing shoes. "I don't Kaken." Katsuki presses his lips together and takes one step toward the nerd. His own breath is caught somewhere in his chest while Deku is hyperventilating, and Katsuki has known him to be a crybaby, but never like this. He's never seen Deku so inconsolable, not even after the Kamino Ward incident or during the war. Katsuki is not gentle, but Deku looks like glass to him right now. Katsuki! The hag hisses behind him, and Katsuki glances at his parents over his shoulder. Her eyes are wide, almost pleading. He hasn't said anything other than your name since he got here. Comfort him. Katsuki sets his jaw and nods. He can be gentle. He crouches in front of the nerd's huddled, shuddering form and debates on what to do with his hands. In the end, he places them awkwardly on Deku's shoulders, ignoring how frail and shaky he feels under his palms. Deku! He grunts, and he winces, but Deku doesn't seem to hear it over his own desperate panic. He makes a high keening sound, and his hands rise to tug at his wet hair. Izuku! Katsuki tries, and he snags one of Deku's hands in his. Hey! Deku lifts his face out of his knees, and his cheeks are blotchy and wet with tears. His hair is plastered to his forehead, and his eyes are more scared than Katsuki's ever seen him, but he seems to register Katsuki as a non-threat because he shifts onto his knees and clutches at Katsuki's hands like they're a lifeline. Kaken! He sobs, and his fingers tighten around Katsuki's. Kaken! He says something else, but it's lost in his quick, brief breaths and his tears. Katsuki shakes his head. I can't understand you, nerd, he says, and he's almost begging, pleading. He hates being so scared, but even more, he hates seeing Deku so worked up. It aches like a rotting tooth in the pit of Katsuki's stomach. You have to, come on, breathe with me. He forces out an exaggerated breath, holding his and Izuku's hands to his chest despite his own racing heart. Kaken! Deku tries again after a long moment of shaking, lengthening breaths together. I don't know how I got here. The admission brings another wave of tears, Deku's chest and shoulders hitching. I opened my eyes and I was and your parents were looking at me, and I don't know how I got here. Deku presses his cold, wet face into Katsuki's chest, over their joined hands. Katsuki shushes him, and holds him tight enough to be grounding but loose enough that Deku could pull away if he wanted to. He doesn't seem to want to. He burrows into Katsuki like he could merge with him and be safe in Katsuki's chest cavity. As if on autopilot, Katsuki gathers the nerd into his arms and hoists him up, all but cradling him in his arms and hating how light Deku is in his hold, and he turns to look at his parents where they clutch at each other in the kitchen. He doesn't meet their eye. We will be in my room, he mutters, and he must look awful, the nerd curled into him and the front of his pajamas soaked through with rainwater and his own terror evident on his face, because the hag doesn't even make a snarky comment about keeping his door open. He nods once and stumbles up the stairs. He closes his door behind him, but he doesn't make it any farther into his room before crumbling. Katsuki slides to the floor against his bedroom door, and Deku situates himself with his legs strewn over Katsuki's lap and his ear pressed to his collarbone. His bony shoulder digs into Katsuki's ribs, but neither of them complain about how uncomfortable the position is. Neither of them say anything for a long time. An eternity, maybe, Katsuki because he knows all too much about his habit of saying exactly the wrong thing, especially to Deku. Deku's breathing evens out, but it's too perfect and measured to be sleep, and his nose whistles with congestion. I think, Deku murmurs after their eternity passes. I think it was one of the other vestiges. The second or the third. They almost never speak to me, but I was in my room, and no one would tell me where you were and why you weren't in class, but they all got this look when I asked, and then I was standing in the middle of your living room, and I was soaking wet all over, and I was just so scared, Kaken. Deku chokes on a sob, and when Katsuki looks down at him, he has his eyes closed tight. I've never seen your parents look so freaked out. He's trying for humor, but it's too soon. Me neither, Katsuki mutters. And he should probably say something else like it's okay or this sort of thing happens when you aren't the only one living in your head or whatever. But he doesn't because it's not okay, and he's not really sure if this sort of thing is supposed to happen. There isn't really a precedent here. Deku accepts his silence. You should shower, Katsuki tells him. I'll lend you clothes, but you're going to get sick, and that's the last fucking thing we need. He huffs, and Deku shifts against him. And then you can sleep here, and I'll make sure none of those fuckers in here. He taps Deku's temple with one of his fingers. Tries to get up and run away with your body, alright? Alright, Kaken. And the nerd's voice is so hoarse and tired, but he still drags himself up off of Katsuki's lap, and he accepts the clothes Katsuki hands to him without a word before turning on his heel for the bathroom. Katsuki stops him before he can disappear entirely behind the door, placing one flat palm against the surface before it closes in his face. Don't, Deku, just try to stick around. Please, he adds after a second for good measure. And Deku gives him this soft-eyed look that Katsuki can't stand, one he doesn't deserve, so he looks away and shoves his hands in his pockets. I won't go away. I'll fight them off with your shampoo bottle if I have to. He offers up a small smile. That's what a hero do, nerd. Deku closes the door, and Katsuki sits against the wall on the other side of the hallway, listening to him shower like a total creep because he can't bear to see someone else come out in his clothes. He bites on the meat of his palm to keep himself from crying or freaking out or anything equally unproductive, and Deku doesn't seem nearly as surprised as he should when he opens the bathroom door and sees Katsuki sitting there in the hallway, his knees drawn to his chest. Katsuki stares up at him without moving, unabashed but palms stinging. Bedtime, Kaken, Deku murmurs, and he helps Katsuki off the ground and leads him back to his bedroom, closing the door behind them with a click. Deku hesitates, so Katsuki wordlessly urges him toward his bed, where the sheets are rumpled from Katsuki's time on house arrest. And Katsuki pushes the photograph under his bed with one of his feet, half to hide the fact he'd been in here crying over Deku and half to make sure either of them step on it. His face is hot, but Deku doesn't seem to notice as he crawls over Katsuki's bed and settles in against the wall. The bed isn't big enough for the both of them, but Katsuki crawls in next to him and lays down on his back, reveling in the feeling of the nerd pressed against him from shoulder to ankle. Katsuki wakes up to a cold spot next to him, and he blows out a big breath and flops onto his back. He stares holes into his ceiling and tells the flat, unyielding surface that he hates the second and third vestiges. He hates them for freaking Deku out like that, for the vulnerable, lost look on his face, for the fact that they never tell him shit, and they might never know who really brought Deku here. He hates them. The ceiling, obviously, doesn't agree or disagree with him on this. Katsuki forces himself out of bed. The moment he starts having conversations with himself, and the inanimate objects of his bedroom is also the moment where he stops letting himself be a sulky bitch. He'll let the vestiges protect Deku, even though he thinks they're doing a bang-up job of it, and he'll take a step back. Because Daigoro was right, Katsuki has failed the nerd too many times to think of himself as his savior. The space beyond Katsuki's sheets is cold, so he tugs one of the shirts from his floor over his head and vows to shower today when he catches a whiff of himself. Deku can never know. He can never know how Katsuki moped over him like some fucking heartbroken damsel. He'll never hear the end of it. Hell, he can almost hear it already. Kaken, did you miss me? As if it wasn't fucking obvious. Anyone who calls Deku humble is a fucking liar, and they don't know him like Katsuki does. Katsuki opens his door and hears 3 voices drifting down the hallway from downstairs, and someone is cooking if the smell is anything to go by. He avoids the creaky steps on his way down, but he's not moving nearly as cautiously as he was last night, no longer searching for the unseen threat that had his parents wide-eyed and scared. Deku is sitting in the chair across from Katsuki's usual seat at their dining table. His back is to the stairs, but even then, Katsuki can tell it's not Deku. The posture is straight-backed and confident, his shoulders set wide as he laughs and makes small talk with Katsuki's parents. Deku never learned how to talk to Katsuki's dad, and the hag always scared him too much, but here he is, telling a joke and making them chuckle like it's the easiest thing in the world. Katsuki gapes at the back of his stupid, curly-haired head. Good morning, Katsuki, his dad greets, effectively giving him away. He raises his coffee mug in his direction, and Katsuki nods in greeting. Izuku is telling us about your most recent sparring session with that one friend of yours, red and white hair. Oh, He snaps his fingers twice, but his dad's always been terrible with names. That's where Katsuki gets the nicknaming habit from. It's Shoto, sweetheart, the hag says mildly. Gross, Katsuki groans, collapsing in his chair across from Deku, who is wearing a small, sweet smile. It's too early for you to be so fucking lovey-dovey, hag. Shoto, that's it. He's a nice boy. Anyone who can kick Katsuki's ass like that is better than nice. The hag snorts, cackling into her hand. Katsuki? Icy Hot's not my damn friend. Katsuki barks. And he didn't kick my ass, I kicked his. He glares at Deku from across the table, crossing his arms and searching for any of the vestiges' tails. It's not Hikage because he's kind of a freak, and N has only ever stared awkwardly at Katsuki. It's not 2 or 3 because they've proven reclusive as all hell. Now, Katsuki, don't exaggerate. Deku tsks, and Katsuki scowls. Nana. At least it's not Daigoro. If it had been him, Katsuki would have left him on his ass on their front step, no matter what his parents said about it. Katsuki? His dad comments, glancing between them over the lip of his mug. What happened to that cute nickname you always used to call him? They were kids, Masaru. The hag states. Now look, they're adults. She pinches at Katsuki's cheek, but he jerks away and bares his teeth, a biting threat. Literally. She glares at him and smacks him upside the back of his head. Well, one of them is an adult. Fuck you too, he replies. Over the course of breakfast, it becomes increasingly obvious that his parents are not aware of the whole soul coma thing, or the fact that the person they're eating with is not the sweet little Izuku they've known for Katsuki's entire life. He'd sort of assumed Yui would tell Auntie, and she'd talk to his parents about it, and maybe they did, but the hag keeps doting on Nana like she's not a fully grown adult in a teenager's body, and it's sort of weirding Katsuki out. It's so obvious to him, but apparently, that's not the case for everyone else. He scowls at the remnants of food on his plate, and watches Nana beam at his parents, cordial and nowhere near as awkward as the nerd. They talk about the fucking weather, and Nana drinks coffee out of one of their ceramic mugs, but she puts less milk and sugar into it than Deku likes. At least she eats, unlike the others. Deku's shoulders are getting too skinny for Katsuki's liking. He doesn't want to have to wait around for the nerd to get stronger again once he's back in control full-time. When his parents start asking Nana about classes and how those are going, Katsuki grits his teeth and stands up, placing both of his hands flat on the table on either side of his plate. I think it's time I walk Deku back to you, he says in a tone that leaves room for little argument from Nana. She narrows her eyes at him, but he narrows his right back, and eventually, she nods and stands. Don't be an asshole, the hag demands. Izuku is welcome to stay for as long as he wants. I really should be getting back before they start worrying about me in the dorms, Nana admits, rubbing at the back of her head sheepishly. It's more than likely too late for that already, but Katsuki thinks they deserve it a little bit. It really can't be that hard to keep track of the nerd, but somehow, he keeps showing up wherever Katsuki is. Don't be a stranger, Izuku, his dad says as Katsuki offers Nana some of his shoes to wear. It's almost weird to see the nerd in anything other than his red shoes, but it's better than going barefoot across the city again. Yeah, don't let Katsuki scare you away, the hag adds. I won't fucking. Katsuki blows out a breath and pinches the bridge of his nose to keep from exploding. We're going. I'll be back, he grumbles, and he urges Nana over the threshold and closes his front door behind them. Good morning, Katsuki, she greets as if they hadn't just had an entire meal sitting across from each other. Nana, he says. Who else? She grins and starts down the sidewalk, and Katsuki can do nothing but follow after her until he catches up and walks at her side. I figured you wouldn't be happy waking up to one of us, so I left you to keep sleeping. Was that wrong? Katsuki scowls at his feet because, no, it wasn't wrong. He would have been in a much worse mood waking up to anyone other than Deku staring back at him. Fucking N. Your parents are very nice, she adds, knowing him well enough through Deku's eyes to see he's not going to reply. They care for you a lot. What would you know? He spits. I was a mother, Nana tells him. I had a son. Katsuki pulls a face at the words coming out of Deku's mouth and the wistful, sad look on his face. Anyway, Daigoro was wrong. About you. I can see your doubt about it, but he was wrong. Katsuki scoffs. No, he wasn't. He told the fucking truth, pulled my head right out of my ass. He shakes his head and drags the heel of his shoe over the concrete sidewalk. I wasn't there to protect Deku. I've never been able to protect him. When Izuka left for the war, he was in such emotional distress that we, the vestiges, were brought closer to the surface, like now. So we saw everything through his eyes, and he spoke to us. He feels so much, this boy. She places a hand over Deku's chest, where the skull insignia on his borrowed shirt rests, and Nana smiles softly. He knew you could protect him, but he didn't believe he could protect you. That's why he left. He didn't believe in me. Katsuki doesn't bother correcting it to us. This is Nana, and this is Deku's face, and he doesn't care about fronts. He didn't believe in himself. I don't need his protection, I'm a hero. The strongest, the best. I could have, if he didn't fucking. He tugs at his hair in frustration. He'd only gone to 2 of his 3 school-mandated therapy sessions after the war, and he never had the nerve to talk about it with anyone else before now. He's a hero, too. You could argue he's several heroes, with all of us existing inside of him. She gives Katsuki a knowing look before returning her gaze to the city stretched out around them. Daigoro knows he can protect One for All. We all know we can protect the Quirk because we've kept it away from All for One for centuries now. Fuck One for All, Katsuki mutters, and Nana barks a laugh. Around them, people jump and stare at them, 2 high school boys on a school day, both dressed in their pajamas, and one of them is laughing like a crazy person. A moment later, the attention leaves them. Yeah? She waves him off. We can protect the Quirk, but no one can protect Izuka like you can, Katsuki. You're just saying that, you damn liar. He spits, rolling his eyes. He wants to be anywhere other than here, listening to her spew this bullshit. She's only trying to make him feel better. I'm saying what Izuka seems to believe. Nana shrugs, nonchalant. He comes to you to fight, to cry. When you both were kidnapped, he told them to hurt him instead of you because he truly believed you would make a plan to escape, and you would need to be the one in better condition. Fuck you, he mutters, but it lacks fire. Shut up. Izuka believes in you, Katsuki. As a vestige, I know his deepest feelings and inhibitions, but you still know him better than I ever will. You can protect him, and you have protected him. You make him feel safe. Why else do you think Hikage keeps waking you up in the middle of the night? She laughs again, and Katsuki scowls. Can you ask him to stop fucking doing that? It's annoying, and I'll explode him to pieces one of these days. It's proof, Nana sings, dancing around on her tiptoes. Katsuki aims a small explosion toward her, but he misses on purpose, and she laughs. Do you really think Deku that I? He grunts in frustration and waves his hand, unsure of what he's even trying to say. I'm sure that Daigoro is wrong about you, Katsuki, she tells him, turning around to look him in the eye. And I wouldn't want to leave Izuku in anyone else's hands when we go back to the plane of One for All. Katsuki nods once, and Yue grows in front of them, imposing and stoic. He stares up at it for a long, silent moment. The front gate is on lockdown, so there's no way in hell they didn't notice Deku was missing from his dorm room once he didn't show up for class. He lets out a long, suffering sigh as he texts Aizawa. Teacher, 1043, nerds W me. Teacher, 1043, come let us in. Damn. He and Nana wait in relative silence. She whistles to herself, or hums, but she's full of the same restless energy that the nerd has always been full of, until the gate flies open, Aizawa standing on the other side with a crazed look on his face. What? He seethes, jabbing a finger in Nana's face. The hell were you thinking, problem child? He's got big, dark craters under his eyes, and Katsuki sort of feels bad for Aizawa. He should have texted him last night, but in the midst of Deku's freak out, it had slipped his mind. Oops. It wasn't me, Nana says, batting his finger away. Aizawa sees harder, his face turning a terrible shade of reddish purple. His hair is starting to float off his shoulders, but he hasn't activated his quirk. He looks exactly like that time dunce face shorted out the 1A classroom to get out of a test he hadn't studied for. And it wasn't Izuku, so do not punish him. Aizawa rounds on Katsuki, but he holds up his hands innocently before he can say a word. Wasn't my fucking fault. He broke into my house. Aizawa heaves out a breath and pinches at the bridge of his nose, muttering something about retiring early. He seems to collect himself, but he jerks a finger over his shoulder. Go to the dorms, he tells Nana, and stay there. I don't care if you have to single-handedly re-kill the other vestiges, but do not let them leave that damn building. No, don't let them leave the dining room table, even. God knows what they'll do with him next. He shakes his head and stops Katsuki when he tries to pass. I'm not even allowed on school grounds, Katsuki shouts. Did I get fucking expelled? No, Bakugo, you didn't get expelled. None of us blame you for attacking Daigoro, least of all me, and I'm sure Midoriya wouldn't either. But Nizu and I observed how the situation was affecting you, and we believed you would better recover from your kidnapping at home, away from the vestiges. This isn't about me, Katsuki insists. It's not about me. Yes, well, you'll be allowed in class again soon. We wanted to see how Midoriya's recovery progressed without you, but he seemed even worse during your suspension. Before, he would come out occasionally as himself, but with you gone, the vestiges seemed to be playing tug-of-war with his mind. Aizawa rubs a hand over his forehead with a sigh. Nizu wants to put him back into hero training. What? Katsuki stutters, more shocked than he'd like to admit. The rat wants to put him in training again? Why? The principal wants to try every avenue for healing Midoriya and expediting the process of getting him back to himself. Aizawa explains, but even he seems to hate the idea. His body is healed, so his soul should be healing faster, but we've seen little to no progress. Recovery Girl proposed that it's because his muscles are atrophying, so Nizu suggested we start going about things as if they're normal again. Things aren't normal, though. Katsuki crosses his arms over his chest with a huff. The nerd isn't himself most of the time, not just sometimes, and the vestiges seem to be doing everything they can to kill him. They won't eat, they won't let him sleep, and they go gallivanting across the city in the rain, totally barefoot, and then they abandon him in my living room. His chest heaves, and he's grown louder over the course of his rant, so he's yelling now. They want him cleared for training Bakugo, and I'm running out of arguments to stall. I just wanted to discuss it with you so you weren't blindsided when he's at training the next time you're in class. Who wants him cleared for training? Katsuki shouts, desperate. Nizu? Recovery Girl? All Might? The vestiges do. They've been insisting on it for weeks, and I have rejected their requests, so they went to Nizu. He seems to think it will help not only with healing but with Midoriya's future training. Aizawa leans against the wall surrounding the school, crossing his arms and looking exhausted. Maybe he's not such a bad teacher if he's trying to keep the vestiges from getting the stupid things they want. The vestiges have a better grasp on their quirks than anyone else. They might provide insight on how to help Midoriya get stronger in the future, and how to master each quirk in turn. That's what I'm hoping for, anyway, because Nizu signed the papers this morning to put Midoriya and the vestiges back into training classes, and there's nothing you or I can do to stop it. Katsuki wants to blow something up. These fucking vestiges. He wonders if they even care about Deku, or if they only care about a centuries-old bone that none of them ever got to pick. He settles for jamming his hands into his pockets and asking if he can come back to school before Deku goes back to training, call it good behavior. And the fact that the vestiges are fucking obsessed with him. Yoichi, the first user, is Katsuki's least favorite vestige. He doesn't have a favorite because they all suck, for the sole reason that he never shows himself. Not to Katsuki, at least. He butts out, and he minds his own business, and that's more than Katsuki can say for any of the others. Katsuki slouches in the armchair, his arms crossed tight over his chest and his knee bobbing. His jaw is clenched hard enough to make his teeth ache, and his usual sneer isn't working to dissuade the school-issued therapist. The plaque on her door reads Komuro Enda, who is sitting on the couch across from his seat. She leans back against the corner of her stupid fucking couch, one of her legs crossed over the other and her expression relaxed and analytical, as if she knows everything about Katsuki just from his silence. He doesn't believe that, not for a damn second. She's a fraud, but both Aizawa and the rat told him that he had to take at least 3 mandated sessions before they'd let him come back to training, just like after the war, and there's no way in hell he's going to fall behind more than he already has. So, here he is, glaring at the window and sneaking peeks at his therapist out of the corner of his eye. This is his third, and final, if he has anything to say about it, session, and he hasn't said much more than "I'm only here so they'll let me go back to class," and narrowly biting back insults while she pokes and prods at him with her soft voice. The inside of his cheek is bitten raw from the effort, and he thinks he ought to be given some credit for keeping his head on for so long. You know. Komuro starts, breaking their stretching, peaceful silence that had thus far gone on since he slouched into his usual chair, the one on the left, closer to the door. Part of these mandated sessions, Katsuki, is actually talking about the issues that put you in here. She tilts her head back as he turns away from the window. The world outside is bright, only a few clouds marring the sky, and he knows on a day like this, there's no way his class isn't out at one of the gyms on campus doing hero training. The muscle in Katsuki's jaw twitches, and pain shoots through his molars, but he only glares at her in response. She uncrosses her legs and leans forward, setting her clipboard down on the cushion next to her, revealing a blank page of lined paper with only his name and the date written on the top line. The last 2 sessions have been the exact same. He opens her office door without knocking, he sits down in his chair, and he watches the hour pass by in the movement of the shadows outside her window. From this bland, cramped office, there isn't much of a view other than a few of the trees on the front lawn of the school. You'd think a therapist for one of the most traumatized, one of the best, hero schools in the country would have a better office, but in Katsuki's opinion, Komuro's office is really fucking lame. She has knickknacks on her shelves, framed degrees on her wall, and a digital clock that she makes sure to angle away from him during their sessions. She doesn't even have blinds that work. The first 15 minutes of his first session he spent watching Komuro wrestle with them and lose. I could put in a request to delay your return to classes if I don't think you're ready for it. Komuro continues, her eyes fixed on his face. She's a plain woman, completely unremarkable except for her big ears which stick out too far from her head and the way she never seems to blink. To be frank, I'm not completely sure that you are ready to go back to classes. You haven't exactly given me much to work with at all here, and you've been through more traumatic experiences in the past year than most people will ever go through in their lifetime. I'm concerned with how you're handling these events, or rather, not handling them, it seems. TCH. I'm fucking dealing with them. Katsuki bites, but Komuro smirks like she's won the lottery, and it's creepy as hell. Katsuki presses himself back into the chair, shifting his weight and resolutely avoiding her gaze. Are you? Because, Katsuki, we've sat in this office in silence for almost 3 hours this week. You'd rather glare at me and just get these sessions over with instead of learning tools to help all of this not feel so terrible. She seems to flounder for the right word, and she picks wrong because Katsuki can't imagine how any of this, everything that's happened since his enrollment in UA, but most of all the shit with Deku and the war, could ever stop plaguing him like a chronic case of the worst flu on Earth. And what of it? I can spend my time here however I want. You told me that in my first session. He lets himself smirk at this, thinking he's won, that Komuro will let him go back to spending the next 45 minutes stewing in the quiet. Komuro narrows her eyes at him, pressing her lips together, and he smirks harder. You'd think he wouldn't be so naive as to underestimate the therapist who deals with the most traumatized school in the country. That's true, you've got me there. But do you want to know what I think? She only pauses for a split second, probably because she knows he doesn't give two shits about what she thinks, but she barrels on. I think you're scared. You're avoiding even thinking about everything that's happened to you, let alone talking about it, because you're afraid of the feelings it'll bring up. I ain't scared. Katsuki growls, his fingers tightening in the grip he has on the sleeve of his t-shirt, his brow furrowed toward the bridge of his nose. I'm not I'm not a pussy. I never said you were. Dealing with traumatic events is difficult, and I know you think these sessions are a punishment, but everyone here at UA wants to help you heal. Talking is the first step. She reaches again for her clipboard and resumes her position leaning back, relaxed, against the armrest of her shitty, blue couch with its ugly floral pillows. I don't need help. I'm gonna be the best, and I can do that on my own. Plenty of pro heroes go to therapy. In fact, most of them do. A hero who knows how to keep himself from burning out is going to go a lot farther and a lot longer than one who doesn't. Komuro watches him like he's the subject of some boring-ass nature documentary, and he shifts in his seat with a scoff without deeming her worthy of a response. Why did you attack your classmate, Katsuki? The shift in topic takes him by such surprise that his mouth falls open, and all Katsuki can do is blink once, twice, before steeling himself again. He shakes his head and crosses his arms over himself again. He looks away, this time turning away from the window. Komuro lets the question settle in the air between them, observing his side profile. Minutes tick by, but the silence is oppressive, now, and Katsuki swallows hard. I think I will put in that recommendation for another delay and more. It wasn't Deku. Katsuki interrupts, curling his hands into his biceps hard enough that his nails dig into his muscle in stinging crescent moons. It wasn't Deku who I attacked. And Deku is Midoriya Izuku. You already know that. I know you know who I attacked. He sneers. Aizawa told you everything about the two of us. Don't think I don't know what's in my own fucking file. I don't want to be treated like a clueless fucking kid. I'll only talk if you knock that shit off. Komuro holds up her hands in a mock surrender and nods. Okay. I'll cut the therapist's bullshit. Katsuki glances away from her face and nods slowly before swallowing again. His hands shake where he has them tucked into himself, and the hour drags by slower than either of the other sessions. So, you attacked Midoriya, Deku you called him. It wasn't him, I already said that. Maybe I'd talk more if you actually fucking listened to me. He's being unfair, and he knows it, but Katsuki won't apologize, not when he already wants to scream and rip out his hair and explode the stupid fucking clock that Komuro turned away from him when he threw open the door. I'm just trying to understand. You're not making a lot of sense. Her pen is poised over the piece of paper that only has his name on it and the date. You can't, tell anyone about anything I say in here, can you? Or I can sue your ass, right? Katsuki eyes her, wary. Talking about Deku without revealing too much would be like navigating a minefield, except the entire Earth would be made out of one big-ass mine in that scenario. He's navigated a minefield before, and Deku used him as a springboard, so the analogy fits like a pair of pants that are a size too small. A little too well, if you ask Katsuki. Komuro nods, quirks a brow. Everything you say to me in this room stays between us. Unless you're a danger to yourself or others, in which case I will need to notify someone, but I would refrain from giving out details even if that were the case. You can trust me. When Katsuki says nothing, letting the silence stretch as he tries to delay it another moment, Komuro makes a vague gesture that tells him to get a move on. He drags in a deep, aching breath. Deku isn't his quirk, there are people that live in his head. He calls them the vestiges, and they're like ghosts, kind of. Not kind of, they're dead, but their souls or whatever the fuck are attached to Deku's quirk, and usually it's okay. They talk to him, give him advice or some shit, but he's still him, but then they took us from the shitty park, while we were cleaning, and it was such a nice day. Katsuki shifts his weight where he sits and blows out a breath. There are goosebumps breaking out over his arms, but he isn't cold. When I woke up, he was already roughed up because he's a fucking idiot, and I hated him for it, but he thinks he's such a terrible hero, and then that girl came in and she told us about her quirk. Katsuki trails off, chest burning and head bowed toward his lap. What was her quirk, Katsuki? She called it fracture. Deku was screaming. I've never heard a sound like that. He was fucking screaming, and then he was Nana. That's one of the ghosts? Komuro asks, and she hasn't written any of this shit down because apparently she's just as fucking useless as Katsuki thought. He nods at his lap and licks his lips. Is that who you attacked in class? No. That was Daigoro. He wasn't fucking paying attention in class. He told me how he would just take the test for Deku, but that test is, Deku has to be back by then, he has to be, and I just got so fucking, I tackled him out of his desk, and I looked down, and it was Deku's face, but I didn't even care because it wasn't him. I still wanted to hit him, even after everything because it was in his eyes that it wasn't him. He sees the image of it in the backs of his eyelids, but time and guilt has warped it. Deku's eyes are full of fear, and Katsuki is burning him up, devouring Deku in his own rage. To avoid seeing the scene play out all over again, this time more fucked up than the last, Katsuki keeps his eyes open until they burn, and his vision blurs. He knuckles at where his eyes meet the side of his nose and sniffs hard, but he's not fucking crying. Have you had issues with this Daigoro before? TCH. Yeah, he's a fucking asshole. The little percent hates me, but that's fine by me because he can fuck off and die, again for all I care. Katsuki rolls his eyes and sneers at a spot on the carpet, his palms popping uncontrollably. He talks too much shit. What sort of shit would that be, then? Komuro gives him an open, probing look, and Katsuki wants to tell her to fuck off, to butt out, to leave him alone, but her threat echoes in the back of his mind. He won't get held back. And he's not scared. He's not scared of anything. He told me I don't know how to protect Deku, but the vestiges, he told me all this bullshit about how they know how to protect him, but they're the ones fucking him up, and they're ruining him. But, Katsuki cuts himself off, blinking furiously and chewing on the inside of his cheek. This is fucking stupid. He doesn't feel healed at all. But, Komuro prompts. But if Daigoro's right, Katsuki starts, talking so slow that it's painful, he has to force the words out, and it aches like a rotting tooth that someone is poking with a fucking hammer. If he's right, and they can protect him better than I can, and they're so terrible at it, then fucking what? Why couldn't I protect him? Katsuki growls and staggers up off his seat, tugging at his hair. The inside of his mouth tastes like iron. He paces in front of Komuro for a minute before stopping in his tracks and letting out a wordless yell. I fucking want Deku back. It's only natural to miss a friend in a situation like this. Komuro tells him in that terrible, soft voice of hers, and it only pisses Katsuki off more. Deku and I aren't friends. He spits because the word doesn't sit right with him. It's not enough, for everything they've been through. Katsuki shakes his head and huffs, his chest heaving. You were right, you know. I do have your file, and I've reviewed everything in it. I think it would be helpful for you to consider how much of that file revolves around Midoriya, truly. And I'm sure if he were in that seat, and if I read his file, I'd see that just as much of him and his story revolves around you. That sounds like friends to me, Katsuki. She doesn't fucking get it. Of course she doesn't. She's useless, and Katsuki hates her, and he wants to blow up her stupid face and her lame-ass office. But he clenches his fists and keeps himself from doing anything stupid. I'm fucking done talking now. Clear me to go back. Komuro stares at him a moment longer before glancing at the clock, and she signs off on his clearance without another word, and he lets the door slam close behind him on his way out. She doesn't say anything about the 13 minutes left in the session. Asterisk. Katsuki thrusts the slip, clearing him for training into Aizawa's line of sight, all but daring him to dispute it. He did his fucking 3 hours, almost, of mandated therapy, And he even spilled his guts like a little bitch while he was there, which was more than he ever wanted to do, but here he is. Aizawa gingerly takes the slip of paper, offering Katsuki a strange look. Did you run here? Katsuki is sweating under the arms, and his chest heaves even as he places his hands on his knees to catch his breath. God, is everyone at this school fucking stupid? Let me in on this training, sensei, he says, and he means for it to sound like a demand, but it borders on begging instead. One therapy session spent actually talking and suddenly he's begging for stuff. Ugh. Aizawa levels him with a flat look, glancing between Katsuki's reddened face and the crumpled slip of paper. Komuro's office is across campus, Bakuga. And I know you wouldn't risk unsupervised, unsanctioned quirk usage so soon after a suspension. They narrow their eyes at each other. Yeah, I fucking ran here. Is that what you want to hear, old man, or are your observational skills failing you? Just let me train with the class, God. He shakes off the exertion from running the entire way across campus, from Komuro's lame-ass office to the observation deck over ground Gamma, where he knew he'd find Aizawa. He'd scared more than one first year on his way here, all but pushing them out of the way, but they need the adversity. God knows the first years this year have had it too easy, and if he can lay them out on their asses by running near them, they'll never last in the hero course. He did everyone a fucking favor by running here, if anything. Aizawa stuffs the slip into one of his pockets, and tucks his face away in the top of his scarf, turning his eyes toward the big windows that look out over the training grounds. Katsuki sees moving shadows, barely more than colorful blobs against the bleak training ground at this distance. It's his class, more than likely doing a battle and rescue simulation, and Katsuki grits his teeth, his jaw twinging in irritation. Something under his skin itches with the need to get in there, to burn off the energy that's been building since he tackled Daigoro to the ground in the middle of class, to get caught up again. Realistically, there's only so much progress the extras can make over the span of a week, but Katsuki isn't going to let Icy Hot of all people overtake him in the ranks after graduation all because of a measly week. Katsuki won't accept any reason to not be number one. I think it would be better if we just watched, Bakugu, Aizawa murmurs, and Katsuki growls under his breath, rolling his eyes. There's no use arguing, even with how much he wants to, how much he needs to, but if anyone will hear out his case, it's definitely not Aizawa, so Katsuki steps forward, closer to the big windows without another word. To the side, there are countless TV monitors, all of them offering a closer, clearer view of the training ground. Katsuki focuses first on the monitors rather than the viewing window. Ears is crouched in one of the pixelated pictures, her eyes closed, and her head bowed as she presses her jack into a wall. Ponytail flits past another camera without sparing it a second glance, her stomach glowing as she creates God knows what out of nothing, and shitty hair follows almost immediately behind her, obviously on the offense if the determined smile Katsuki catches on his face is any indication. Moron. But Katsuki can't help but watch raptly as his classmates fight and duel and defend, and some of the monitors show training dummies left for someone to rescue. He twitches with every attempted blow, his breathing going short with anticipation and his heart pounding against his ribs as if he's right there in the fray with them. He wants to be in there, fuck. If you're not letting me join because they've already started, then that's fucking. That's not why, Bakugu, Aizawa interrupts, and his eyes never leave the window. Katsuki sees strings of tape fly out over the southwest quadrant of the training grounds out of the corner of his eye. I figured it would do you better to watch after being out for so long, that's all. Aizawa shrugs, and Katsuki squints at him. Says the guy who threw us into competition with each other the day we started here. Aizawa heaves a sigh and finally deems Katsuki worthy of his full attention, dragging his eyes away from the observation deck windows. The bottom half of his face is still hidden from view, tucked away in the folds of his scarf. I call bullshit, sensei. Language, Bakugu, Aizawa sighs, but they both know it's more of a pretense than anything. Aizawa blows out another breath, this time more resigned. Tired. Katsuki's only been back for all of 2 minutes, what the hell does he have to be tired about? I could only hold Principal Nizu off for so long. Aizawa admits after a long stretch of Katsuki holding his ground, his arms crossed over his chest and his expression expectant. No way in hell Aizawa would hold him back from training without some sort of motive, and he'll be the judge of whether that motive is good enough or if it's shit. He's twisting my arm, and he threatened to take Midoriya's training into his own hands if I didn't include him in today's exercise, and that is, trust me, training under Nizu is the worst-case scenario. So, Deku's here? Katsuki asks, the insides of his mouth going dry and cottony. It feels like such a stupid question. Deku's rarely anywhere lately, and they both know it. It aches like a rotting tooth, and he's pressing his tongue into it until he tastes blood. Except he's never actually had a cavity. He's above that, too good for something as trivial as bad brushing habits, so he's not actually sure that's a good or proper analogy. Yes. Aizawa eyes him for another long moment, and his expression is unreadable. Or Katsuki is too distracted by the knowledge that somewhere out in the bleak cityscape, Deku, or whoever's decided to make an appearance today, is jumping around and fighting and probably wearing that stupid, gritted teeth smile the nerd insists on making his brand. Katsuki's heart jumps at the thought. He's been doing okay lately. Have some faith in him. It's not him I don't trust, Katsuki grumbles, glancing back through the windows. One of the buildings below him lights up with golden sparks of electricity, and Katsuki presses his lips into a thin line. Have some faith in your classmates, then, Aizawa amends. It's not them either, he scoffs, rolling his eyes. Deku could take any one of them with an arm tied behind his back. No, both arms tied behind his back, and both of us fucking know it. The vestiges. Obviously. Katsuki bites, but it lacks his usual fire. Aizawa hums in vague agreement. He'll be okay, Bakugo. You just... I've done enough therapy for today, thanks though. Katsuki snarks. He turns back to the TV monitors, this time searching for someone. He's grown enough in the past few weeks to admit to himself that he's looking for Deku now that he knows he's here, that he might catch a glimpse of him in action or a glimpse of him at all. Anything will do at this point. He searches and searches, but he comes up empty. No green lightning, green hair, or stupid freckles on any of the screens. Damn it. He schemes through the flickering, pixelated pictures again for good measure. You gonna let me train now or what? Huh! Katsuki adds without looking away from the screens. From the corner of his eye, he watches Aizawa glance at his watch. All Might and Recovery Girl are on the way by now. Just wait for them to get here before you go, alright? Katsuki rolls his eyes, but he notably doesn't complain. He's itching to get a look at Deku on one of the monitors before he jumps into the exercise. If the strange look Aizawa sends him is any indication, Katsuki's silence is more telling than he thought. Aizawa watches the extras fight it out through the window, his face tucked into his scarf and his hands clasped behind his back. He accepts Katsuki's silence and says nothing more about Deku or the training or his suspension, and Katsuki is glad for it until the door to the observation deck bursts open. All Might stands on the other side, slouched over and coughing into his fist at his own dramatics, and Recovery Girl shakes her head by his side and thumps him on the back with the heel of her hand. Good morning, Aizawa, she greets, hobbling past All Might's decrepit figure and taking her place at Aizawa's side in front of the windows. Bakugo, my boy, All Might greets in a hoarse murmur as he wipes blood and spit from the corner of his mouth. He slaps Katsuki on the shoulder and nearly sends him sprawling with his unnatural, surprising strength, but he keeps his feet under him and only stumbles. Thought you'd be eager to get back into training after getting cleared, but observation is not a bad choice, either. All Might offers him a wide smile and jerks his head toward the window. Aizawa told me to wait for you to show your face. Katsuki grunts. Sure took your time, but now. Before Katsuki can continue, there is movement just outside the observation deck, a green blur flitting past closer to the deck than any of the other extras have come so far, and Katsuki's jaw drops at the sight, his eyes tracking the blur like magnets. He couldn't look away even if he wanted to. All Might's hand tightens where it rests on his shoulder. Deku seems to freeze midair, green lightning bouncing off his skin, and he turns to wave through the window. Cheeky shit. But he catches Katsuki's eyes through the glass, and it must take him by surprise if the bug-eyed, gaping expression his smile drops into is anything to go by. "Kaken!" he mouths, or yells maybe, but the glass is too thick to let any sound through. Katsuki goes all warm and embarrassingly fluttery inside at the sight of him because this is Deku, surely, and that's all that matters. But the fluttery warm feeling crumbles to pieces, revealing horror as Deku's eyes move to the figure behind Katsuki, and his expression shifts again. This time, instead of surprise, his face goes blank and pained in the same way it has so many times since their kidnapping. Katsuki all but watches the fight in Deku's eyes, one of the vestiges clawing their way to the surface, shoving Deku out of the way like some schoolyard bully. But in the split second of flickering micro-expressions, the green lightning flickers and dies out, and gravity takes hold of Deku's body. He plummets out of sight like a bag of boulders, all horrifyingly dead weight, falling through the nearly 50 feet of open air between the observation windows and the ground below. All Might's fingers curl into Katsuki's shoulder like claws, hard enough to hurt, and he'll more than likely have finger-shaped bruises carved into his skin later tonight, but his ears are ringing and between one blink and the next, Katsuki is blasting his way down the hall, the observation deck door slamming against the wall in his wake. By the time Katsuki makes it to Deku's side, the dust is already settling around him and the crater his body made. "Oh God, oh my fucking God!" Katsuki mutters, falling to his knees and ghosting his hands over Deku's prone, frail form. His hero costume is torn around scrapes, and one of his legs is bent out of shape in a way that has Katsuki swallowing back an acidic nausea. Dust covers the nerd's skin, hiding his freckles and turning his hair a brackish shade of gray in a garish mockery of how he might look if he lives to see the age of 40. Aizawa kneels on the other side of the crater, and Katsuki offers him a wide-eyed look, his lips parted and his knees aching where shattered rocks dig into his uniform pants. But Kugu! All Might reaches them in the same moment, out of breath and heaving and moving faster than Katsuki's seen him move since the Kamino fight, and as he leans over Deku's body, the nerd gasps and jerks, his eyes snapping open. Katsuki lets out a wordless yell and falls back on his ass as the nerd lets out a long breath and blinks the dust out of his eyes. When Katsuki manages to sit up again, Deku is shifting amid the rubble around him without so much as a wince or a gasp despite the blood matting his hair to the side of his head and the clicking noise that may or may not be coming from the nerd's bulging shoulder, not to mention his broken leg and whatever else is broken which Katsuki can't see. He's wearing a small smile, glancing up at All Might, and Katsuki can't help the vision of Deku, skinny as hell with a big-ass head, in his younger years, his knees scraped up but a smile on his face despite his red-rimmed eyes, muttering Kaken, so cool. Except this time, Deku mutters something that sounds like Tashinori. Katsuki sees red. Nana, he murmurs, deceptively calm. Deku's eyes flit toward him, then back toward All Might. Katsuki draws in a long, whistling breath, his palms crackling. I trusted you. What the fuck? I trusted you. He explodes then, but he is too angry to even lunge for Deku and instead lets off two big explosions and clutches at his own head, tugging at his hair. I trusted you to keep him fucking safe because none of the others would, and you turn around and you almost get him killed because you want to fucking talk to All Might? You can't fucking take care of him. None of you can. You can't keep him safe because you don't care about him, not like I do. I hate you, I'll kill you. His voice is hoarse and too loud in his own ears, and his face is wet. He only notices because the wind blows, and his cheeks are cold and damp, and his vision is blurry. Just let him back into his body, please. Please, please, please. Fucking. Katsuki drops to his knees again, this time feet away from Deku's body. He wraps his arms around himself, cradling himself and breathing hard. Deku, All Might, and Aizawa stare at him, and he feels so insane, and it only serves to piss him off more, but he's too tired to be angry anymore. He thinks of Komoro, and he hates her. He hates everyone, probably, even himself, not for the first time since all of this started. Maybe I am fucking selfish for wanting him back, but at least I'm not getting him fucking killed. He spits, and Recovery Girl finally catches up to them, her cane thumping on the crumbled asphalt, and she pushes Aizawa and All Might to the side, muttering to herself and fumbling to get to the nerd's side. All the while, Nana stares at Katsuki, her eyes wide and apologetic. Katsuki can't stand the sight, so he turns away. But Kugu, she starts, but Katsuki shakes his head. Fuck off, he whispers, but there is no feeling in it. No bite, no fire, nothing. I need to heal Midoriya before we move his body. Recovery Girl interrupts. So you'll need to give him control again. We will need to be quick with this, or he will be in more pain than I will be able to manage for him, okay? Nana nods, her eyes downcast, and several of the old bitch's medbots roll to the edge of the crater, ready to cart Deku's body away. Katsuki doesn't let himself watch, but his hands tighten on his biceps at the sound of Deku's agonized groan. He squeezes his eyes closed and doesn't open them again until Recovery Girl leaves with her bots and Deku on the stretcher between them. Yo, Baku bro! We're gonna go hit up the medbay to see how Midobro is doing. Shitty Hair pounds his fist against Katsuki's door again for good measure, as if Katsuki didn't hear his loud, annoying-ass voice the first time. Fuck off! Katsuki yells back, trailing it with a set of increasingly threatening explosions. Geez, okay, man, we get it. Shitty Hair grumbles, and Katsuki listens as his footsteps recede. Katsuki lays on his bed with an arm tucked under his head and blows out a breath. None of this should have happened. If the nerd hadn't been so damn selfless, letting Katsuki get off easy when they were both strung up like pigs in that little concrete box of a room, if this could even be considered getting off easy with the amount of heartache it's caused him, everything would be fine. He's lying to himself. Deku's not the one Katsuki's mad at. It's not his fault, and Katsuki knows it. Deku can't help but be so self-sacrificing. He's been like that since forever, or at least since Katsuki started pushing him and everyone else around himself down. So maybe this is Katsuki's fault, in the end. It's all just one big fucked up domino effect. Katsuki made Deku the way that he is, and he threw himself in front of Robo-Bitch and her cronies, and now here they are. Deku's in the medbay for the billionth time, and Katsuki is glaring holes into his ceiling as the sun sets over this shitty-ass day. Tomorrow will be better. He tries to tell himself that, but he's not sure if he even believes it. Enough time passes, all of it spent stewing on Katsuki's part, that Shitty Hair returns to his door, this time knocking instead of pounding and standing outside in silence for a long moment. Midoriya's okay, he says finally. They're gonna keep him for a while longer to keep an eye on him, you know, but I thought you'd like to know. He's okay. Recovery Girl said she got most of his injuries in that first kiss, so he's all good now. Like I said, just thought you'd like to know. Shitty Hair's shadow lingers in the crack under Katsuki's door for another minute before the idiot sighs and retreats into his own room. Everyone else gives Katsuki's door a wide berth, so wide he can't hear anyone else pass by, not by their footsteps or by their paused conversations. He feels like a haunted house, the sort of local legend that even the dumbest kids steer clear of. Or a bomb. That might be the better comparison, considering everything. The first set of footsteps he hears, hours after Shitty Hair's door closed behind him, Katsuki would know anywhere. Soft, hesitant steps coming closer to his door from the direction of the elevator. Katsuki would give the person on the other side shit for using the elevator over the stairs if the image of Deku's twisted, broken leg wasn't burnt into the backs of his eyelids. He heaves himself off his desolate nest of blankets stacked on his bed with a groan, and he opens the door before the other person can knock. It's Deku or Deku's body. Katsuki knew it before he opened the door because he knows Deku better than he knows himself, better than he knows his own quirk. What's that bullshit Komuro spewed at him? Their stories are intertwined, or whatever? Katsuki is starting to think that might be true, that might have been the only truthful thing Komuro said to him in all of their sessions together. Who the fuck are you now? Katsuki bites, keeping his voice low to keep all the other extras, Shitty Hair especially, off his ass. Deku gives him a surprised look, his hair wild but clean of dust and rubble, and he blinks twice before stuttering. I'm Deku. He fumbles, waving his arms in the space between himself and Katsuki's door and Katsuki. Deku's wearing a pair of plain, nondescript pajamas, probably from the med bay. They're not at all Deku's style, but they're leagues better than another hospital gown. Katsuki hums. For how long? Deku's brows draw together over the bridge of his nose. Is that what this is about? Fuck's that supposed to mean, huh? Katsuki glares at him, squaring his shoulders at the nerd's vague response. It sounded almost like an insult, somehow. Just let me in, Kaken. Deku squares his shoulders right back, working his jaw in that mulishly stubborn way of his. For how long, Deku? Answer the damn question. Katsuki isn't quite sure why it's so important that Deku tells him, but there is a desperate edge to his voice, and Deku must recognize it because his eyes soften without caving from his headstrong posture. For now. Isn't that enough? And Katsuki doesn't have anything good enough to argue against that, so he opens his door a little wider, and Deku slips in, brushing against Katsuki's body on his way past. He is warm and solid, and he smells like antiseptic and scentless shampoo and Recovery Girl's perfume. Katsuki closes the door softly behind him, trapping him and Deku in the confines of his room. Deku, for his part, doesn't seem to mind. He observes Katsuki's room like it's his first time seeing it, even though he's been in here countless times. But Katsuki doesn't interrupt, even as Deku runs his fingers over the indentation of Katsuki's body in his mess of sheets and blankets. The nerd sits on the edge of the bed gingerly, fiddling with his own fingers and looking up at Katsuki through his bangs. You've been avoiding me, he accuses, but there's no animosity in it. Deku says it like it's fact, and it might as well be. Or you're not yourself around me. You haven't been, not since. Can you fucking blame me? Katsuki huffs. How can I be the same around you when you aren't you? All I ever wanted when I was here was you, Kaken. Deku hisses. There's a spark in his eye, but he doesn't get up off of Katsuki's bed. He stays on the lower ground, slouching into himself, and it pisses Katsuki off. I just wanted to see you, make sure you were okay. I barely remember anything after that girl started touching me, and suddenly I opened my eyes, and you're gone, and days have passed. Everyone tells me what happened, and they say you're okay, but I need to see it with my own eyes, but you won't see me. Even when I see you, it's like you just look right through me. Finally, Deku throws his hands up, exasperated. I couldn't, Deku. Katsuki clenches his jaw and glances away. Why not? I needed you. No, you didn't, he insists, and he wishes Deku would understand, would let it go. For the first time, he wishes one of the vestiges would take over so Katsuki could go back to brooding instead of having this conversation. Why couldn't you see me? Why couldn't you be around me? There's a desperate, teary edge to Deku's voice that hollows out part of Katsuki's chest. Because I couldn't watch you, I couldn't see you like that anymore, alright? You weren't you, and it fucking hurt like hell because... Katsuki trails off, unwilling to finish the thought. The fight drains out of Deku's shoulders like sand through his fingers. I'm sorry. Don't fucking apologize, dumbass. Well, I am. I'm sorry. I know it was hard. Katsuki lets out a humorless laugh. You can fucking say that again, nerd. It was 1 minute you'd be here, but then you'd go all slack, and you'd jerk, and your eyes, you'd be someone else, and I was the only one who noticed. I hated it. I wanted you back, but the vestiges, God, I could hear them. And you. While I was in there. Deku interrupts, his voice soft. They were wrong, Kaken. Deku stands finally, and he crosses the room to stand in front of Katsuki. Daigoro has a lot of pent-up energy, and it wasn't fair for him to say those things to you. He was wrong, and I don't blame you for punching him. Actually, thanks for punching him. He deserved that. You didn't, Katsuki says, miserable. That doesn't matter. He deserved it because he was wrong about you. You are the only person who has ever made me feel safe, Kaken. Deku says it with all the sincerity in the world, but it makes no sense. Katsuki shakes his head, numb, and Deku grabs him by the sides of his face to keep him still. Why do you think Hikage always sought you out? Danger sense is only ever quiet when I'm with you. Deku smiles, and it's blinding, but it falls after a second. I ran away to protect you because I couldn't lose you. It was dumb, I wasn't thinking. Fucking obviously. Katsuki tells him with an eye roll. I could have told you that, dumbass. You would have protected me just fine during the war, Kaken. You're amazing like that, I would have been safe. But I knew I couldn't protect you. I was too weak. That's what I was worried about. Katsuki gapes at him for a long moment, long enough that Deku turns red and averts his eyes. Then Katsuki smacks him up the back of his head with a growl. Ow! Kaken! Deku shouts, indignant and rubbing where he got hit. You're a fucking idiot, Katsuki answers. Mean! Deku takes him by the arms and shakes him like that'll drive his point home. We were having a moment. I'm trying to convince you that you're good at keeping me safe, and you hit me. Whiny bitch. Katsuki rolls his eyes, but he catches sight of Deku's face afterwards, and it makes something in his chest twinge painfully. Are they going to come back? The vestiges? Deku offers him a look that verges on pitying, but he shakes his head. Nana agreed to keep them all in check, and they return to their playing. Fucking good, Katsuki huffs. It probably gets boring being stuck in my head, Kaken. Deku pauses. Nana wanted me to tell you that the job of protecting me and keeping me safe goes back to you. I have to agree with her. Katsuki isn't quite sure he agrees, not yet, not after weeks of beating himself up. But he'll get there, the more he hears it coming from Deku's mouth with Deku and only Deku behind the eyes. She's looking down on you, Deku, you can take care of yourself. The vestiges will be there to save me if I ever need it then. Deku acquiesces with a sage nod. TCH. That's my job. They can fuck right off. Deku giggles and shakes his head, and he looks so pretty in the dim light of Katsuki's bedroom. My therapist called us friends, and it pissed me off. He blurts out, and his face goes hot with his blush. Deku's brows draw together over the bridge of his nose again, and his hands tighten on Katsuki's biceps. Katsuki can't look him in the eye. Are we not? His voice is underlined with hurt, but the shitty nerd is obviously trying to cover it. Hold on, you have a therapist? That's not. Katsuki shakes his head and presses his lips together into a thin line. It pissed me off because she didn't understand. She didn't understand us, she spouted all this bullshit about how my file, so much of it revolves around you. And our stories, whatever the fuck, they're, like, intertwined, I guess. His face is on fire, like if he ignited his hands in the biggest AP shots he possibly could. That's what his skin feels like, all the way up to the tips of his ears and down the back of his neck. Kaken! Deku trails off, but he sounds like he knows. Of course he knows what Katsuki is trying to say, it's Deku. I think she was right, but it pissed me off that she said we were friends. Katsuki squeezes his eyes closed, admitting this is too much, but admitting it to Deku's face, Katsuki might just die on the spot. And I think. Deku cuts him off, brushing his hands up Katsuki's biceps to his shoulders to his neck to the sides of his face again, cupping his cheeks, and Katsuki leans into the touch, hot even against his own hot skin. His fingers tighten around Deku's t-shirt, twitching and nervous. You think? I think. But Deku cuts him off again, that asshole, this time by pulling Katsuki closer and brushing his lips over Katsuki's. It barely classifies as a touch, let alone a kiss, but it's perfect. Katsuki throws caution to the wind and kisses Deku, really kisses him, none of that bitch-ass lip-brushing bullshit. Deku's lips are chapped, and his shirt wrinkles under Katsuki's hands, but Deku only presses closer, his fingers brushing the edge of Katsuki's hairline in front of his ears. Deku smiles against him, and it's a good feeling. If Katsuki were dorkier, he might call it wonderful or amazing or any other synonym, but he's not a dork, not even for this dork who he's sharing air, and spit, within who's looking at him through half-lidded eyes and blushing like a fucking schoolgirl. You think? Deku prompts again, and Katsuki's brain is fried because he just kissed the only person who's ever mattered to him, even when he thought he hated him, and this is the only place he's ever needed to be. I think I want you to kiss me again, he murmurs without thinking, and shit, maybe he is a fucking dork because what the hell was that? Even Deku laughs at him, his eyes bright and teasing, and Katsuki growls and tries to squirm out of his hold. No, Kaken, Deku begs, still giggling but keeping his hold on Katsuki even as he scowls. I'll kiss you again, see Mir. No. I don't want a kiss from you anymore, asshole. Quit fucking laughing at me. It was cute. I liked kissing Kaken too, let me do it again. Please, Kaken, please. Katsuki levels him with an unimpressed look to match Deku's blinding smile, and he stops struggling. Deku kisses him again, and it's perfect, and it's Deku. Only Deku.